Hello, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. Please let me know in the comments where you guys are watching from, what city, what county, what state, what country. I have a very special guest with me today, a very dear friend. His name is David McBride. He is a former, so he's basically, he went into the British Army. He finished Sandhurst, which is like our equivalent of West Point in the United States. And so he became an officer, and then in the Australian SAS, which is the Special Air Service. So these are special forces. He was a lawyer, and he exposed corruption and war crimes, and they're trying to put him in jail for that. David, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm very happy to be back on, Richard. You have a particular place in my heart because you were one of the very first interviews that I did, long interviews with someone overseas, and
Thank you.
that was we've played that and replayed that, and since then you've got bigger and bigger too. So it's great to be back with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, David. And the thing is that I kind of wanted to start with this recent ruling in Australia, and I thought you're the person to ask, not only because you're a whistleblower, you were in the SES, but you're also a lawyer, right? So can you just start out very simply by telling us who Ben Robert Smith is? Because I think there's a trend to market him as the most decorated Australian soldier alive, and he was in Afghanistan and he received the Victoria Cross. But for the people who don't know, can you explain who he is and why this recent ruling was so important?
Well, I'm interested to see my friends in the UK. It's had a lot of coverage in the UK, which is interesting. Probably not much in America. He was Australia's most famous soldier by far. He was the face of the Afghan war. And it is a very important case because a lot flows from this. He won an important medal in 2006. I'll just give people a painted history. It's sort of below the Congressional Medal of Honor, but just below. And then 3 years later, he won the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor. He also did a lot of press conferences. He's a huge bloke physically, very good looking. Women just swoon over him. He's like 6'6", like an American football player, and very well muscled, tattooed, but very well spoken. And he gave a lot of press conferences, and he was just generally he was probably the most loved, and he was even Father of the Year, and he would do media appearances with abused women, and put his arm around them in a very paternal way. He was beyond most. So there was no one else like him. If he had stood for president, he would have been elected. Put it that way. And there were always rumors about him in the military, and quite well known. But rumors are just rumors. And in 2018, the newspaper, two very big newspapers, equivalent of the Washington Post, I guess, in Australia, ran these huge stories saying, actually, first they used an assumed name, so it got everybody's interest up. They called him Leonidas. They said that, based on the Spartans, And it seems like they didn't choose that name randomly. It seemed like his whole ethos was like he kind of thought he was Leonidas, and when he kicked someone off a cliff, he seemed to think that he was acting out some scene from 300.
Yeah, so he literally kicked someone off of a cliff. An Afghan man. That's what the judge.
And it wasn't even. A lot of his defenders say, "Oh, well, you know, he was just taking out Taliban, and you know, that's what happens in war." But that wasn't the case. This was just a random guy who had gone to the local village to buy flour, and been picked out, and they'd asked him, where are the Taliban? And this guy was like, no, I don't know any Taliban. And then they just killed him. And so there was no suspicion that this bloke was Taliban. They were trying to, it looks like most of the things they did, and snippets for people who are in the military, you pick up on snippets of the story that go over other people's heads. Now, one of the things that came out that other SAS soldiers, and this was another good thing, he was outed not by journalists really when they ran the story, but he was outed by other SAS soldiers who were every bit as brave, every bit as patriotic, or more so really, because he wasn't what he pretended to be. And but they'd say they'd gone up the Congo with a reference to the Joseph Conrad novel or the Apocalypse Now, a kind of mixture of both, and which meant that they weren't trying to actually kill Taliban. They were trying to terrorize the population by doing things, by just grabbing a random bloke, throwing him off the cliff. When this guy got thrown off the cliff, it was in full view of people, and they shot him when he got down the bottom. And when he didn't shoot, Ben Robert Smith, according to the allegations, which has been proved, he didn't shoot the guy himself. He got his Afghan, got other people to do it. And that wasn't an accident. That meant that they couldn't squeal on you. They were now involved. I mean, you told them to do it, but once they did it, they could hardly go and give evidence against you.
Ordering other SAS to do it at first, and then I kept digging into this, and as you hinted, he told the interpreter to tell an Afghan to shoot this Afghan man.
Yeah,
right. Something. Okay.
In that case, he got an Afghan to do it, but there was another case when he got a rookie to do it.
Yeah, it's blooding.
But he's complicit himself. I mean, he's saying you need to shoot this guy. There's a lot of sort of Hollywood references because it reminds me of that a movie which I really like, the Brad Pitt movie Fury, where they do that when they've got a young guy. And in that movie, you can see that there is some sort of justification when you've got a young rookie who is he's not prepared to fire on children. But in this case, it wasn't justified. There was
it wasn't justified. Yeah, because I just wanted to kind of point out. Sorry to cut into that there, but there were basically 6 murders that were discussed in this case, right? So he was suing the papers for accusing him of having murdered people, and then I think out of the 6, the judge said or ruled 3 of them to be true based on what was it, the hanging on the probabilities of what testimony and facts the judge had seen, right? So at least 3 of them we know are likely true.
And the judge was very fair. The judge was very good judge. We were lucky in this case. Justice was lucky. We had a very good judge who took a long time to write his judgment. It was like 600 pages long. I think that's the one of them. And there's a classified, and that's a big judgment. There were 60 witnesses or something, and he really was very judge-like in the sense that he in the cases, even though he knew it was a very serious allegation to make, he said, I'm satisfied in these 3 cases that it's, well,
God.
he didn't say beyond reasonable doubt, but he said it's clear that this is what happened. And also there were other things, because he said, in judge language, he said Robert Smith was an unreliable witness, which means he's a liar. And there were luckily there were lots of different incidents, and it didn't just have to come down to that. Like he buried some USB sticks in his back garden, and his own wife, it seems, gave evidence against him to say, yeah, no, he buried it, and she had very detailed. They're in a pink.
This whole thing is a labyrinth.
Barbie container or something. Yeah, it had a ring of truth about it. And then he counterclaimed against her, and he told her he was going to take the children off her. He had a mistress. Now, it wasn't, the judge was good. The judge said, I'm not satisfied. The mistress's story wasn't particularly clear. And the judge was good enough to say, I can't find with any certainty that he hit the mistress.
Right, because that was also involved.
The fact that he even had a mistress, and he told his wife, you need to lie and pretend we were broken up. And she was going to for a while. And then she got, because then I think she just began to see, as you would, your wife, you're married to someone, you always give them the benefit of the doubt, but she just began to see that he was full of shit and had been for a while. And he threatened her, and he's going to take the children away. And I think that one of the, while the judge only made 3 sort of those serious findings, one of the things that really sunk him in the eyes of Australia was all the little shitty things that he did. He had, he burnt his computer with petrol so that police couldn't get it. And then when he asked about it, he said with a straight face, yeah, doesn't everybody, burn their computer with petrol? And the whole mistress thing, the mistress had an abortion, and it looked, and he sent a private investigator to make sure she really was having an abortion, and he sent letters to other SAS people saying, if you give evidence, I'm going to burn your house down. And
God, I feel like he spent more effort trying to hide the affair than the killings.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people lost faith in him. Yeah, more because of the affairs than actually. There's still a lot of people in Australia. They don't necessarily come out and say it. Usually, they're on Twitter with assumed names or fake names, and they still love him. And they're like, "Oh well, war is war." All these backyard warriors saying, "Oh, war is war," and you know how hard it is. But the problem is with him, he didn't run that defense. If he'd come out and done the old Colonel Jessup, you can't handle the truth. Yes, I killed people, but I killed people to save Australian lives or something. He would have had a chance, but he didn't say that.
He didn't even bother doing that.
I've never done anything wrong. He actually, the lawyers were good. They trapped him at the beginning, possibly because he was such a pathological liar. They said, "Do you understand what the rule?" And he had a lot of get-outs. He could have said the rules of engagement were bullshit. They didn't apply. But he didn't. He said, I absolutely understood the rules of engagement. I would never, ever commit a crime. They do what they call shut the gates. They got him to say he was an angel. And also he was a bit of a dog about it. He probably burned my house down for saying that. But
God forbid.
I know, coming from other SAS people, he didn't just say they were mistaken. He said the people that gave evidence against him are liars and dogs and cowards. And these are people that have spent 20, just like him.
Yeah, weren't most of the people giving testimony SAS, whether for
Absolutely.
Or against?
The people it was painted, and he still got people painting it. It was painted as him versus the journalist, but it wasn't. It was other, obviously braver, stronger SAS people who were not a bit like me. They'd seen blood. That people say that about me. They try to imply that. I've been around the world and I've seen some stuff, and that doesn't. You don't. You could still speak up even though you see.
Yeah,
shit.
exactly.
There's a line, and he had crossed that line. He didn't even, he ran across that line. These were not cases of, could have gone one way or the other. I was a bit tired and a bit shaken up. This was something like, we are going to kill this bloke, we are going to rip his head off, and then we're going to say he was an insurgent. And nobody's if you try to tell the truth about it, I'm going to kill you. And there were things which have a ring of truth about it, where he said things like to other SAS people, I just want to get someone in a room and I want to blow him away and I want to look at the face. I want to watch his face as he dies.
Yeah, I think he said that it's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen or something like this. God,
shooting a teenager in the face, and another time I want to strangle someone and I want to watch the life force go out of him just to see what it's like. And they all had the ring of truth about it. They weren't all proved, but they certainly weren't disproved. And but the fact that he wouldn't admit he'd done anything wrong ever, and the fact that he was trying to burn other people's houses down, and he almost got one SAS bloke killed because he called
oh, really?
The cops. Yeah, he called the cops and said, oh, this guy's got a gun and he's dangerous and he's at home. And the SWAT team came to his house.
Yeah.
And it could have been death by cop for this guy. If he'd come out swinging or not being compliant, the cops could have shot him. And that was exactly Robert Smith's plan. And that's pretty bloody sinister.
That's one of his own people doing that. Yeah, doing that to one of his own people,
someone
right?
Who, for all this sake, like, oh, I'm a proud soldier who
that's what I wanted to say.
My country first. Proud soldiers don't do that. They don't go and kill their bloody workmate just because their workmates don't say what they want.
The three that were proven, just so we can keep count, the three that were proven, I think. You mentioned. I think it's so brutal, right? I have trouble kind of just explaining it to people. One of them you mentioned is basically he kicked someone off of a cliff, a man, and then when he saw the man wasn't dead, he got the interpreter to tell an Afghan to shoot him. So that's one of them, one of the murders. Then the other one is he killed someone with a prosthetic leg. And now I think we come to the most disgusting one of all, if you could even, quantify them. He took the guy's leg and then they used it as a drinking vessel in a bar. I mean, when I read this and I saw the pictures, what do I say? Help me, David. What do I say?
Funny enough,
it's so evil.
Being a soldier, that didn't bother me too much. Although when I was in Afghanistan in 2000, I met some Taliban. They were our guides around there, and there was one in particular that I didn't mind. I could see he was a soldier. If you're a soldier, this is before 9/11, of course, and if you're a soldier, you can get on with other soldiers, whatever they represent. And he had a prosthetic leg, and I've often wondered whether he was the guy 10 years later that they'd shot. And drank out of it. I don't think that the dead guy, if he could speak, the dead guy, I don't think he'd particularly care whether they were using his as leg as a prosthetic. I think they probably
he'd probably be more pissed off that he was murdered, I suppose. Yes.
Yeah, he'd be annoyed, and not say the Taliban weren't angels, but they would be annoyed that the Australians lied about it and got medals for being brave, when actually all they'd done is just blown someone away who was standing there with handcuffs on. I think that they would just think, own. And they'd be right. They'd say, own your own actions, and honesty is important for them. And they'd be saying, well, fucking, you're just full of shit when you went home and told your wives and your fellows how brave you were, and you went to the left and went to the right, and then you got up and used your superior skills to outshoot the Taliban, when actually you took this guy out with handcuffs on, stuck him in a field and blew him away.
Yeah, it's an execution.
You talked about it like it was bravery. I imagine that Taliban's ghost would be going, yeah, you were pretty fucking brave when you shot me lying on the ground with handcuffs. I think he'd be allowed to at least. I like to think maybe he made anyone that drank out of it gave them a bad stomach.
I'm just going to put this up quickly, but yeah, basically this was with Americans as well. So you had Americans and Australians in this bar. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me because I'm when I'm in the middle, I don't. You end up making. You probably have this problem with you too. You sometimes, unless you're extreme on one side or extreme on the other side, you're going to get people from both sides hating you. I don't think that drinking was too much of a problem. What was annoying about that was that Robert Smith again just denied it and said, in fact, I think he even said, yeah, that would be a disgusting thing to do, to drink out.
You're right. He said that. Yeah. And then the pictures were
just hypocritical. I mean, because he obviously didn't think that. So why didn't he just say, well, war's tough and this is what happened? But he was like, I think he was like, oh no, that would be terribly disrespectful. I would never do that. And
right. And this is after the pictures have come out. Yeah. He's like, I thought it was vile at the time.
Yeah, and it was like, he couldn't. What do they say? He couldn't tell the truth when the truth would do, and that's not the sort of person you want looking after Australians. Because a lot of Australians were like, he's just people, especially the right wingers, they can't shake it that he's not a good person. But you'd say, if he's that untrustworthy, there's no reason why he wouldn't come back to Australia and rape your daughter and kill her. And then you'd be upset. Then you wouldn't be saying, oh, we can never put our soldiers on trial. Then you'd be bleating. Then you'd be bleating for the nearest investigative journalist to actually do something for you. Don't think that just if people murder in Afghanistan, that they're not going to murder in Australia.
Exactly. And
all these people that say, oh, we shouldn't put soldiers on trial, they'd be very happy to put soldiers on trial if their own interests were threatened by soldiers.
Right.
It's a lot of, this would appeal, there's a lot of racism. They think, oh, brown people don't matter. They only shot a brown person.
Do you think that's a big factor with Ben Roberts-Smith or in general?
I think it is. People. It's the same with China now. There's a certain amount of inability for people to think that somehow Afghans didn't deserve it, and somehow even if a woman had her head blown off for no particular reason in her own house, somehow something about her deserved it because the Taliban, were her fault or something like that. There's no sympathy at all for many thousands of people that had bombs dropped on their house. Like there was we had this kind of childish view. Oh, we were there in Afghanistan to help the women and children. We killed thousands of women. You can't go to school if you're dead. And yet no one kind of thought of that. What about all the bombs we dropped in order to create safe conditions for Afghan women? We killed a lot more Afghan women than we ever allowed to go to school. And we weren't there to make them go to school. We were there for our own geopolitical interests. And but people, there's a certain, I do believe it's a racism. Yeah, if an Australian woman got killed by the police, they'd be more outraged. An outcry. But there seems to be an Afghan woman getting killed. People are like, oh yeah, oh well, soldiers are soldiers, and that's clearly wrong. We have it in relation to China now too. You see, it's probably clearer in Russia. It's kind of funny. We used to have to hate the Russians because they were communists.
Right.
And communists wanted to, they were godless people who wanted to take our lifestyle away, And now the Russians are not communists, but strangely, we still have to hate them.
Yeah.
And
for some reason.
weird. I mean, why do we hate them now? That they're not communists, and it's actually some sort of racism that no matter what they do, apart from being a part of the United States, we have to hate them.
Yeah,
same with China.
I agree with you. This logic is present.
Yeah. Like I'm seeing more and more, which is good, but, stories from people saying China's not the way it's portrayed in the West, and a few good guys on Twitter, French bloke, and some people just refuse to believe it. They just cannot believe that some people in China are happy with the regime, that they have eradicated poverty. They have done a lot of things, and what they're doing with the Uyghurs is certainly better than what we did with the Afghans.
Yeah, like we suddenly care about Muslims now,
Yeah, we didn't just... And it's amazing the hypocrisy we have, saying, oh my God, they treat Muslims so badly when we can't see what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and
Guantanamo Bay.
And yet we want to sort of point the finger at them and just say, well...
That's rich.
And a lot of it is just racism, Chinese, and we had it here. You can see the old newspapers in Australia, because the Chinese, or some Chinese nationals, were in Australia quite early.
Mm-hmm.
They came with the convicts, and they were certainly big in the gold rush, and they were hated then. You could kill a Chinese national in Australia 200 or 300 years ago and probably get away with it by saying it was their fault. A lot of them got robbed and murdered, and there's some terrible stuff. We had some, funnily enough, there's a Muslim friend of mine who's a bit of a historian, and she's researched, there were Afghans in Australia, cameleers. They brought them out to build the railway, the very long railway between North and South Australia. I think to put the telegraph in, some sort of these engineering feats. And because they had skill in the desert, they came out with the camels, and they helped put the radio telegraph in, which is through very inhospitable country. And and there was a few of them, and they one married a white woman who had been abused by her husband or whatever, and they experienced terrible racism and violence against them, even though they were these sort of peaceful guys who did a very good job running camels. They built a mosque, and that was considered quite outrageous, and they weren't allowed to live with the whites. It makes you cringe, but that's not even that long ago. Way it's quite endemic with us. And,
I wish I remembered this story, but I think there was a really good cricketer, and when the team went for a pint, he had to sit outside. Which that when I was growing up, and I heard this story, I was. Like you said, there's
a lot of
cringy.
Terrible history like that in Australia. The first Australian cricket team were Indigenous, and they were really good, and they went to England, but I think then they were banned or something. They weren't allowed to play, and the Indigenous diggers who went to join the military and went to the First and Second World War, when they came back, they weren't allowed to go to the RS, which is just, when you imagine the anger you must have felt.
You got people in Africa who fought for France, same treatment after the war.
You can imagine, you could see what that would make you a terrorist. You would say, how dare you? After I fought for you, you sort of treat me like a dog.
It's horrible. Really.
It is.
Even Alan Turing, they chemically castrated him after he cracked Enigma with the Polish.
That would send you mad. I mean, it would send you absolutely mad. Turing. That's a heartbreaking case to think that they hounded him. And
Christ, I couldn't believe this.
Kind of respect, even though he was. If you had to put winning the war on a particular person. It would be on him, because that code breaking was absolutely.
I'm speaking to you on the computer. I mean, not this specific one, but he's also credited as the father of the modern computer. So you and I were able to converse thanks to his work, and of course winning World War II. Like you said, if you had to put
and yet
give that
the
victory.
Police hounded him because he was gay, and they just could not accept that. All his good work that he'd done meant nothing. It's heartbreaking. It's kind of outrageous, and it says a lot about the West that we haven't come to grips with our hypocrisy.
Unfortunately. And I have to say, unfortunately, I agree with you, David, because I think towards Russia, towards China, there's some kind of racism, that's deep-seated in Europe, in the West. I think most people, they don't realize that they've been conditioned and duped into just hating the Russians. It doesn't matter whether they're communists or not.
Yeah, I know.
Absolutely.
And that's why that Russiagate was so important, because Trump, the possibility of sort of relatively peaceful relations with Russia was just something that they could not deal with. I noticed this when I was in Afghanistan, in the sense that the problem with fighting the Muslims, and it really was a war on Muslims, you couldn't sell enough expensive equipment. I mean, it was ridiculous. We phased out perfectly good aircraft for our purposes in Afghanistan, the Warthog.
Right, I was about to say A-10, yeah.
Yeah, everybody loved the A-10, the special forces, and because it was slow, and it hit the target, and you knew you were going to be all right if the A-10 arrived on the scene. We got rid of them and replaced them with the F-35 or whatever, which wasn't nearly as good.
They do different jobs, don't they?
Yeah, which, imagine if you're going at Mach 2 or whatever, it's pretty hard to hit the target, especially in a place like Afghanistan where there's civilians and you need sort of accurate fire. And it was 10 times more expensive, or probably 100 times more expensive. And yet, and I could sense that the big munitions manufacturers didn't. It's probably the main reason why we withdrew from Afghanistan. It was expensive, but it wasn't expensive enough, for Boeing and whatever. And
I see.
They really wanted war with a technological power like Russia or China, because that meant you could sell more equipment. You could sell battleships, you could sell, aircraft carrier and all sorts of stuff, which really cost big money. And
that's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And that's why I think the real reason we pivoted to Russia, and I could see it even before we left Afghanistan. There was a story in the New York Times, and it was a bit like this sort of blowing up of the pipeline. It was obviously false. And one of the advantages I've got is that working as a military lawyer, one of the jobs you've got to do is to sign off on false information where we put out in order to confuse the enemy or whatever. To say we're in one town when we're actually in another town or whatever. But when there was a story saying, Russians are paying a bounty to Afghans to kill American soldiers. Now, that was clearly a false story. You don't need to pay Afghans money to kill Americans in their country. But it was made to pivot hatred from Afghans to Russians.
I see.
And it ran and ran. And of course, the only source was intelligence sources, which is who are paid to lie. So why would they tell the journalists of the New York Times the truth? And but yeah, I could see that was that pivot. And this is why they've been so successful with Putin and Ukraine, is that they spent 20 years putting out propaganda against Putin. And now it's got to such a state now, they could unilaterally bomb Moscow with nuclear bombs, I think, and probably 60% of the West would say, good on you, that's fantastic.
Probably.
Putin is a monster. And it's because they've spent 20 years doing anti-Putin stories, and no one
They've already drone striked it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then they can even get away with it. They can say, "Oh, the Russians did that themselves." That was some sort of false. That was the Russian, Putin haters that did it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and they can get away with that kind of rubbish. And even if someone like Seymour Hersh exposes them, he gets rubbished and vilified. And so we have this terrible perfect storm now, where it's anyone that talks the truth, which goes against the US narrative, is just destroyed. And you can say something totally ridiculous and get away with it.
Yeah.
And the only source you need is these security services. We've learned a lot of really bad lessons from the Vietnam War. I used to think we have evolution, positive evolution, but it seems to be negative evolution, in that they've learned that the reason that they lost the Vietnam War was because people saw the truth from journalists in the field. So
right.
Now they make sure there's only embedded journalists who are with the military, and they're thankful for the military for getting them this meal ticket, and they kind of got a little bit of homoerotic love for the soldiers, and they write these beautiful about how good. I mean, no one. The biggest kept secret. Everybody who was there knew the Afghan war wasn't going well, but you never saw it in any major paper. You never saw the sort of stuff about it. Now, that's outrageous. 20 years. You never really saw any big expose to say, even just the money that was being wasted and going into contractors' pockets and then back to US companies. You never even saw a story about that.
Yeah.
Now that's an incredible cover-up. 20 years is a long time to keep that lid on that secret. You
do a disservice to yourself and Assange, because you two are the ones
There's
who
a few
did
of those
the
voices, and also disservice to yourself, because without people like you, we'd be dead. And this is why independent media like you,
thank you, David,
literally save the world. Literally save the world.
Well, let's do it together, because I don't even know what to say. Like now when they're hitting Moscow with drones, and it's just like, okay, whatever, it's normal. I mean, in the Cold War, this was unthinkable. that you would have a hot war or any kind of.
The Cold War, it was so much better. When I was in NATO. On the sort of the Russian, we were in West Germany, on the sort of East German border, on the Soviet bloc border, and it was better then than it is now. I can tell you. There was less,
I believe you.
Less hysteria, less false stories. We were further. We certainly weren't going to unilaterally attack Russia. We were actually a defensive organization. And we were only there for defense. That was our job.
Back then,
gone mad.
Back then, I said this when I gave a few speeches, that we could have had a different conversation, but in the 1960s or in the Cold War. But we're not in the Cold War anymore. So there's no Soviet Union. There's no reason for NATO to.
NATO should have been disbanded in the 90s.
The Warsaw Pact was so. Fair is fair.
Yeah, exactly. It's reason for being. And of course, this is one of the problems with the US. If you've got to really, and we all learn it in history about the causes of World War I. If you just keep building up your military, it's going to be used eventually. I mean, it's not. They say, "Oh, we need to be prepared," but it's become this. One of the analogies I use for my book is the snake that bites its own tail, in that we put in a tax on ourselves, situations that we've created ourselves, and we might, like a snake biting its tail, you get some sort of quick adrenaline hit because you think you've caught onto some prey or something like that. So you think it's good, and you hold on all the more tighter. And the tail panics because it's been attacked by something. It doesn't realize it's being attacked by itself. And of course, the snake wriggles and bites and wriggles and bites as hard as it can until it dies. And that's pretty much like the Western system. We keep building up our militaries. They have all this technology. As a result, it gets used. Sometimes we're boxing its shadows, and we get some sort of small term hit for boost in popularity. Biden has obviously got more popular the more he talks about war, the more he commit. They can't give enough money to Ukraine. This is how obscene is this, and this pretty much sums up what's wrong. If they wanted $6 trillion in Ukraine, they would get it, and yet you've got people on the streets of the United States starving, living in tents.
It's shameful.
There's that huge crisis with this sort of artificial heroin, and there are huge problems in the US now, and they don't give a shit. Yet Zelensky can ask for a gold-plated Cadillac, and it'll be there in minutes. It's,
truly, that's nothing.
It's that's obscene. And if you were an American doing it tough, how would you feel? If you were a veteran with lost your legs or something, fighting for your country, living in,
that's how they treat them. Like the VA is notorious for being bad.
That?
It's notorious
like
for being
in
bad.
Afghanistan. It's a way. War is a way to turn public money into private money. You know, they give a contract to McDonnell Douglas or Boeing or Northrop, and it's for whatever $1 trillion, but they know they're going to get $1 billion back through political donations, secret share deals, all sorts of, Cayman Islands. The politicians are going to get a share of that back. So, and yet the money that they gave wasn't politicians' money, it was taxpayer money.
There you go.
So the taxpayer money becomes politicians' money. And of course, a lot of it gets shaved off to the corporates. But it's the people who really lose out from all of this is the American taxpayer. They pay for everything, even no matter how. They paid for the Afghan police, huge bills, the Afghan, all these things that are now defunct, all these bases which would be destroyed. And that was all paid for by taxpayers in Mississippi and Tennessee and California, a lot of whom don't even get medical. Well, none of whom get free medical. That's outrageous. True. That's there should be a revolution in the US. Actually, I'm not saying that. I might get arrested, but you would understand that the levels of dissatisfaction in the US must be very, very high.
Yeah. It's shameful. Veteran or otherwise, they don't get any healthcare, and if they do, it's barely. Calling it adequate is kind of a compliment.
It's a disaster, and yet money for Zelensky
every second. He's gotten more than Israel, which is kind of a surprise, right? Like they were number one.
Something.
Truly.
And I went to a good book launch the other night. I'll give my friend a plug, called The Palestinian Laboratory by an author called Anthony Lowenstein, who I really like. And he's a very brave guy. He's Jewish, but he's sort of, I wouldn't say he's anti-Israel, but he's a critic of Israel's excesses, which makes him, a target. I'm surprised he's still alive, actually, but he's written this book about, and it's quite worrying. There we go, very, very quick, and it's really it's quite depressing in some ways, but very, very good. He's saying that all this sort of technology that Israel is what they called field tested in Palestine and it's all pretty sinister. All the phone hacking and ways, facial recognition.
There you go. That's very.
Other countries love it.
Yeah. So you've got the regular ordinances and weapons that people think of, but as you mentioned correctly, the cyber warfare. So they're exporting They're building drones in England and exporting them. I think it's Elbit. And there's they always shut down the factories, the activists. They're good. And then, as you mentioned, this Pegasus, they blacklist Pegasus, the Americans, but there are other companies. You have people who made Pegasus who make new companies, and that's it. They're not blacklisted.
No, I saw. I know it's disgusting, and the governments can't get enough of it. And I saw something, not even governments. I saw something very worrying the other day. And again, you have to know what to look for to pick up on it. But it was the equivalent of the Bar Association, a lawyers group in Victoria, who you'd think it'd be all about human rights, but they had some sort of incident where someone had put an obscene a meme basically up on a wall, and it was in sort of poor taste, but it was not the biggest deal. But this Bar Association chased the culprits by hacking their email. They hacked all the lawyers' emails looking for and then they were like, oh yeah, we won't do that again because that may be, because some of the lawyers were like, what are you doing with?
Shouldn't they know
some
better?
Sort of Pegasus system where they just decided to hack everybody's emails and find. And that's just some sort of corporate version of Pegasus where they managed to get hold of that. Oh yeah, we can go and hack everybody's emails, and that's the Bar Association that did that.
I mean, I'm not quite sure to respond.
Yeah, I mean it's
wild.
But and so rather than sort of people sticking up for sort of human rights, they're just getting trampled left, right, and center, and everyone can justify it. I mean, they say national security. We need to do this for national security, but this bar, they just did it because they wanted to find the culprit for a sort of ugly meme.
Yeah,
So it's not. It's bullshit that it's national security. It's just like naughty kids looking in there, in the spying in their neighbor's window and looking in people's phones. It's not. There's no justification for it. It's just like, oh wow, have you heard what we can buy from Israel? Let's get it, and then we can, we can start behaving badly. It's a shame that nobody seems to be outraged by it.
After Snowden came out, you had all these companies that popped out of nowhere trying to kind of capitalize off of this notion that you need a VPN, you need this email to protect you, you need encryption, military grade encryption, and I was talking about this teenager who's a climate activist. No clue what their name is, but they're part of a group in France who they basically do sit-ins. They go to some cafe or someplace and do sit-ins. And the French police saw the person's email, and they asked Proton Mail, which is in Switzerland. One of these companies says, "Oh, we respect your privacy," to hand over the IP address, and they used an Interpol warrant or a Europol warrant, saying it was terrorism. It's a kid who skipped school to do some climate thing. I mean, it's outrageous, They can call anyone they like a terrorist, and then use Pegasus, use warrants.
That's one of the big problems. Like, I'm called a terrorist, which means that they can do extra things to me that they couldn't do if I was just a criminal.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Set me up with people who try to, and this is why I'm always, avoiding talking about violence, because they once I met someone who I suspect was an agent who was trying to sort of coax me into taking up arms against the country, on some sort of spurious grounds about how the government was run by it was sort of QAnon stuff, but he was trying to talk me into violence. And then when I said, no, I'm not interested in violent revolution, he got really angry at me and said, "Oh, you're just full of hot air. You should be doing more." And it was, I believe he was probably an agent provocateur trying to get something.
So like entrapment or something.
Sort of stuff they can do to you when you're a national security threat like me. And of course, the only real national security threats are whistleblowers. Most of our secret intelligence services would be working on anti-government dissenters rather than actual people who know how to use it.
Unfortunately true. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, David, did you see the latest decision on Julian's case? Because they basically denied his appeal. He's going to reapply, I think, on Tuesday. And, as of now, currently, the extradition has been approved, right? So he has to appeal all of that.
I saw that yesterday, yeah.
Yeah.
I was a bit of confusion because I saw Stella Assange say that she was they were going to appeal to the High Court on Tuesday, but then I thought I saw something early this morning that say that that's not going to happen. But
do you think the government in Australia is doing enough?
Good.
Do you think the new one, because Penny Wong and Albanese, they've talked about Assange, but do you think they're doing enough for him and for you?
They're not, but at least there has been some progress. I mean, that is to their credit. At least they have said, we're not comfortable with the situation. Like, that's better than the previous government. Now, that's a long way from victory, but it's certainly on the way, because they can't go back on that now. And while he said enough is enough, and if something happened to Assange, or he would look pretty bad, because even if he's just said enough is enough, which is obviously not really particularly good, it means that they are beginning to get concerned.
Mm-hmm.
That is a step in the right direction. Now, obviously, it's they could do, and as other people have pointed out, and you've mentioned my case, which it doesn't make any sense for them to agitate for Julian Assange's release and also put me in jail at the same time. So actually, in a humorous way, Biden could say to them, "Oh, shut up! You're trying to put your own, war crimes whistleblower in jail for 100 years. So what are you doing coming to me complaining about me doing exactly the same thing as what you're doing?"
It's quite a contradiction, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Biden, I mean, as you and I know, of course, the funny thing is behind the scenes, Joe Biden probably doesn't even know who Assange is. He's probably, he's just pushed from pillar to post. And of course, it's all been run by people behind the scenes, the Mike Pompeos, or who tell Biden what to say, push him out in front of the cameras, but he would have no say. He could say, "I love Julian Assange," and they would just laugh at him and say, "Shut up, read the lines on the auto cue, and we'll pay you with breakfast if you do a good job." I mean, he's not he's clearly not the decision maker on this, and as soon as it's national security, it's made by people way above his pay grade, and but making noise in Australia, I think in some ways it'll be quite. There is a silver lining anyway to him losing that appeal, because it causes interest and to go up. And people, apparently the surveys say 80% of Australians, or maybe even 90%, want Assange to come home.
Right.
They've tapped into that patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily, the average person is quite conservative. They don't like whistleblowers, because they kind of think they're rocking the boat. And there's a certain amount of trust in government, which is probably misplaced, I would say, but it's still there. But they also are very patriotic, and they don't want to see an Australian stuck in a horrific high security cell in under the rocks. It's wrong to say Colorado. When we say Colorado in Australia, you think of Aspen and skiing and beautiful scenes, but of course he's not going to be anywhere near that. He's going to be in some dreadful underground bunker, and which could be anywhere. And the average Australian is quite a sort of conservative but nice bloke, but they don't think that seems right. That an Australian to be subjected to that, and he's not a murderer. he's not really anything but an idealistic sort of person, and to see him crushed, because everybody knows he just embarrassed the US government and they can't handle that. And the idea that they're going to kill him quickly or slowly is not going down well with Australians. And I think that's moving in the right direction anyway. Obviously, there's still got a way to go. But I'm confident that we are going to win, both my case and his case.
Yeah.
Maybe before you and I speak again in a year's time. So it's like I'd see it in terms of the Second World War. It's not an overnight victory. It's sort of like a 6-year campaign. We have small victories in battles every day.
Right.
And I've seen rather than dwell on the negative, I've seen good progress in the Assange campaign. I mean, there was a lot of excitement when Stella came to Australia last month, because we thought it was going to be AUKUS. There's a lot of anti-AUKUS. We've even had ex-prime ministers, our equivalent of ex-presidents, come out and say that AUKUS is a disaster and subs are a disaster. And that's good. These are powerful, interesting, smart people. In fact, one day I want to make a list on Twitter of people who are on our side and people who are on their side, because increasingly the people on our side are the intelligent, the experienced, people who are sort of admired around the world. They're increasingly on our side, and on their side is looking pretty tatty,
Yeah, especially with Biden.
Mike Pompeo, you've got a few dweeby kind of guys, and their team is not that great.
No,
it really isn't that great. And,
no, it's not. It's not.
And so that has improved. And I guess it's all about momentum. And but thanks to people like you, you've been doing great work. And I see you.
Thank you, David.
It never stops. There's a guy out here, called Michael West, and he does the equivalent of you in about finance and about government rules and about how, and every day, every day he's got a new atrocity. And you think, oh God, it must be kind of hard. But you're the same, I don't, and you'd be the same. Activists, we don't have time to follow how many terrible things are happening overnight. But because there are so many.
There are so many.
I'm so happy to see that your station has got bigger and bigger.
Thank you very much,
because it's really important work, and it's a war, but it's a war where we're getting the momentum. Stalingrad has passed, El Alamein,
right,
and we're slowly moving on. Eventually, we'll get to Berlin and blow up their swastika.
Yes. Amen.
That makes me happy. We've always got to keep a smile on their face. And I think I said that to you when I spoke to you 3 years ago, whenever it was. We've always got to keep laughing, because they would love to see us. They love to see us be in pain or be
That's true. They want people to give up.
Now our smiles are getting bigger and their smiles are getting a bit smaller.
David, thank you very much for all the kind words. You have an open invitation, and I think all the nice things that you just said, they apply tenfold to you and to Assange, because you guys are really not just in the front lines. You guys are at the front. You're in the first wave, and going all the way. And I was actually going to ask you, how is the situation now with your case? So, like, what stage are we in now?
Well, we're in Act 3. We have a date for hearing, 13th, lucky 13 of November. It's a 3-week trial. We're trying to get the charges dropped for a while, but we're feeling pretty good about it now. We're happy to go to trial. We think we will get a win either way, in the sense if they put me in jail for a long time, there will be public outcry, a bit like Assange. People don't need to understand.
You can count on it.
Yeah, people don't need to understand the full ins and outs of my case to say if I get put in jail before anybody, even the guy that shot someone on national TV, he has been charged, but he won't be going to trial for probably years. If I'm the only one from the Afghan-Iraq war who goes to jail for 20 years, people are going to say, really? With all these scandals and rubbish and that's gone on, what exactly did this guy do? Did he really reveal any national security when you've got people who clearly murdered?
How does BRS get away with it? I don't understand this.
Well, he's probably flying around the world in a private jet now.
I heard he's in Bali.
He was in Bali for getting his back rubbed for the trial. Yeah, he's not really doing it tough. He's probably going to go and work for some private security company.
We'll have an Australian Blackwater next. He can have that.
Exactly. He's probably. I don't think he's doing it tough. So yeah. And those offences, even though it was a defamation action, those offences were proved. So it's gonna, I almost will them to put me in jail, because nothing will make a blow up in their face more than putting me in jail and then trying to justify while I'm in jail when there's all these other people, and not just the corporals, but generals with big question marks over them, and they're living the big life in their mansions or traveling around. There's all these kind of corporate crooks. We've had a big scandal with PricewaterhouseCoopers where they were stealing government secrets and giving them to their clients so they could avoid tax. And now, while there's been a little bit of a scandal about it, no one's been charged. They're unlikely to be charged, let alone go to jail. They're probably not going to miss next year's Aspen trip. And yet, I'm in jail. I mean, that's going to sit very badly for the government to say this guy. Even my enemies say, "Oh, look, I was a well-intentioned person who believes, I'm a little bit wound up, a bit tight, and believes too much in the rule of law and doesn't, whatever they say. There's no one that can say I'm a spy. I've got no connection to any other country. I never made any money out of what I did." Right. It's going to be very hard for them to sort of keep me in jail for 20 years when all these people who clearly did some very bad stuff are prospering and, and got money in their pockets, and my book's going to come out before the trial too, and that's going to make
you have to come here to plug it.
That's when I'll be back on next time to get that up. It'll just be before the trial comes out. And so we'll plug it and see if we can get on a bestseller list. That will really, they'll hate that. We'll get the Russians to buy
it. You better use rubles. Those dollars are not
get it translated into Russian and Chinese. One thing I would like, and this is serious, I would like it put into Afghan language and Arabic, because I'd love people in the Middle East to see there at least is someone from the Western world who can see the hypocrisy and lies for what they are, and to a certain extent wants to apologize for it, or at least someone who stood up, because I think that would be, nothing would help peace more than us cleaning our side of the street and saying, at least one person say, I can see we were full of shit, and it must be incredibly hurtful for you, I'm here. This is one of my big, I guess, dreams, is to go back to Afghanistan, go back to the Middle East as some sort of peace ambassador. And of course, the best way to start that process is to say, this is the truth. We did this wrong. We did that wrong. We did that wrong. And that doesn't mean that the others, other sides won't do well. But that if you want to start a decent dialogue, start with the truth and start with admitting your faults.
Absolutely.
I would love to do that, and this is a good way to
it's
start.
Very noble. It's very noble,
yeah.
and coming to terms with your own history. I think it's just critical thinking. It's but in your case, it comes from a place of real reflection and love, and it's a noble endeavor.
People like you, it works. I mean, we had a guy, an SAS bloke, who he didn't murder anybody, but he was part of a team where someone was murdered. So again, not a Taliban. We came into town. The SAS came into town. They shot the first bloke they saw.
Just drop a knife then on their body.
He was wounded, and then they there was no the sort of supporters and haters go, oh, they were just killing Taliban. This is another situation where they clearly just shot a random.
Mm-hmm.
Shot a random, and he wasn't dead. He was wounded in the leg, and then the sergeant took this random off to a private room, said, where are the Taliban? The guy was like, I don't know, whatever. And then the sergeant kicked him to death. Christ. And this guy wasn't Taliban, but he's, funny enough, his family ended up joining the Taliban.
I wonder what.
A witness, one of the other members of the patrol who saw this, and he knew he didn't do it. He didn't stop it. Not that it would have been easy to.
I see what you mean.
But still, people being people, and he's obviously a very good person. He felt very, very guilty about this. Chewed him up over a period of years.
Oh.
He wanted to make a bit like recompense. He wanted to. Ideally go to Afghanistan, go back to this village and actually say, I'm sorry. And COVID made that impossible. And so he did it by Zoom. And, the typical sort of racist scenario in Australia was, don't do that. They're only going to ask for money and whatever, don't give an inch. But because he did it, and of course it wasn't what people said, and the family were only they weren't even sort of angry and outright. They were impressed that he had the honor to make the call and to say, I should have done more. I'm sorry, your father's dead, and I should have done more. Now that impressed them. They didn't say, give us money, or how dare you, or, violent. They were impressed that he had the honor. And while it's obviously a sad call and they're not exactly going to celebrate, it's still, it was honor to honor. They kind of acknowledged it. And they also, they've lived for war all their lives, the last 50 years. It wasn't as if he was beyond their bounds of understanding. They knew that in war, soldiers would kill people or whatever. But what did annoy them was that we lied about it,
it's like adding insult to injury, kind of.
Yeah, that's the hypocrisy that, got to them more than anything else, that we would come there and say, oh, we had to fight for our lives against these, Taliban, and actually we shot someone who was holding a shovel, and then we kicked him to death. That's you can imagine. That, because you can see, and this is one of the great myths, because we used to say, oh, the Taliban, they brainwashed kids in these madrasas and they torture them and brainwash. That's the only reason why anyone would join the Taliban, as if they've been brainwashed. They didn't have to brainwash them. Stories like that got out, and people wanted to join the Taliban, and you can understand why. The truth was enough to make people join the Taliban.
You can find similar stories in Iraq and Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're just brainwashed.
Exactly.
It's nothing to do with us.
Brainwashed. They're robots. They're not real people. No real person would support that. Yeah, if they sort of hear about stories, they didn't have to make up lies to get people to do. Well,
same thing in Ireland as well. You had people joining the IRA after what?
Well, I was there, of course. Yeah, and our propaganda wasn't. We didn't try to lie quite so blatantly. We knew that they were people fighting for self-determination, and we didn't try to say that they were. I don't think so, anyway. But it was just. Our propaganda was lies, not theirs. All they needed to do was to tell the truth, and this is why it made me so angry, because I was a true believer in the Western forces, but we became the people that we said we weren't. We became the people that we said we enemies were. We put out the false statements. We killed the civilians and said they were Taliban. They didn't need to lie to recruit. They recruited because the average person knew the truth, that we were full of shit and that they were fighting for their country against collaborators and foreigners. And I saw it in there was a few telltale signs, a bit like the Viet Cong. One of them was their soldiers fought for rice, our soldiers fought for money, And that you're on a loser when your people won't pick up a piece of paper, let alone a rifle, unless you give them $100, whereas the other guys are fighting with fury in their heart and happy to get some free rice. That is when you're on a loser, and we put out all the sort of false.
It becomes projection, like all the things you just described. It's really just projection in the end, and I say that a lot because everything we say that today in 2023, it's the Russians and the Chinese. Everything we accuse them of doing, it's actually.
I had a big tweet, when the Ukraine war started, and somebody said to me, trying to catch me out, saying, do you think the invasion of Ukraine is illegal? And I said, well, you can't enforce the law against one country and not against another. And if the invasion of Iraq wasn't illegal, or we didn't punish anybody as a result, put it that way, we can't start punishing Putin for doing the same thing. The law is only the law if it's applied consistently. And then I went into a longer one, just saying I don't remember the Russians having any black sites where they took people to Kazakhstan or Thailand and tortured them to death, specifically because those countries did not have anti-torture legislation. I don't remember the Russians doing, things like General Petraeus, who was in charge of all the wars, and yet he had a bevy of 6 mistresses that young, not even mistresses, young female lieutenants that he was having sex with in turn, and at the same time pretending to be some sort of moral crusader. I went through the list. I can't remember them now, but we say the Russians are bad. And yet we're the ones with the secret torture sites where we kill people, often innocent people. We just take them off the streets, take them to some country, deliberately selected, torture them to death. Yeah, projection is exactly right. And I was cringing when I saw that horrible Victoria Nuland.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, the Russians, they often do stuff and try to blame it on us.
It's straight out of the Russian playbook, right? They love this stuff.
I know, and you think that just makes my blood boil. And then when Seymour Hersh, pretty much conclusively proved that they blew up the Nord Stream, he was attacked by Washington Post and New York Times. they have, in some ways, you've got to take your hats off to the CIA in the way that they have successfully infiltrated the major news networks so seamlessly.
Yeah.
But it's a sad, we are heading for a dystopian future, if we're not already there, where it's slightly different than in the sort of sci-fi movies, because it's CNN. It's all these things that you think are normal journalists are actually putting out government propaganda. They're not dressed in government uniforms, but you and I know that they actually are government operatives in good disguises, African Americans and the people that you don't think, oh, he's a government operative. But when you start listening to what they're saying, you think actually,
they all sound the same.
Government operatives.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And that's something which changed in my lifetime, and it's one of the most worrying things. I mean, the New York Times and the Washington Post helped stop the Vietnam War, and they exposed the Watergate, and they brought a government down, and at risk of going to prison, and now that is
they're
so
different papers.
Now they are actually working for the government, and in the worst possible way, not just putting out happy messages, but actually running down people like Seymour Hersh.
The funny thing is, Washington Post, they themselves have admitted 2 days ago that Ukraine was telling the United States about wanting to blow up Nord Stream. So it's like BBC. They come 20 years later and say what, and they'll interview someone who says that, well, the war in Iraq was a mistake and so on. But when it matters, they never actually tell the truth, right?
Yeah, it's a bit like, I know, and that worries me. I mean, it's more than just a game that can destroy the world. I mean, one of the scenarios I can see, again, with little bit of military inside knowledge, this is not classified information, don't want anyone to get arrested, but it's highly likely that the US want a war in China, and they will start one with
I was going to ask you about this.
Yeah, they will start one with a false flag attack, and we need people like the New York Times and Washington not to come in 10 years, like you said, 10 or 20 years later to say, oh, yeah, it's a false flag attack when no one really cares. They need to be aware of it and start outing the military now, because that's a serious, no one's going to benefit. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to do with Assange is actually start putting pressure on American corporations to do more for him. People like Nike and the sort of stuff who are ubiquitous around the world, and to say, you're not blameless here unless you're either with Assange or against him, and if you're not making noises about him to the your government sponsored representatives, you are against him, and you would need to. You're not going to be selling many Nike training shoes if there's a nuclear war with China. No one's going to want to go jogging if there's nuclear waste floating in the air. And I can assure you, in California, there will be. You reckon the Nike training shoe company might be trying to stop a war because it ain't going to be good for sales. I think a lot of their stuff is sold in China and made in China anyway. So what's going to happen to all their factories, so they have an interest to actually do some more about saying, really, you want to have a false flag attack in China? And, maybe the hawks in Washington think, oh, yeah, China's becoming an industrial power and we need to do whatever we can. But hopefully some saner heads in the corporate world will be saying, I don't know whether it's going to be good for sales.
I can't believe we have to depend on the corporations to come save the planet. It sounds a bit weird.
They're the power in America. It's seamless. It's not as if like and we talked about it in Washington. The security services within the papers now, but there is such in fact, it's wrong to even say there's a revolving door between
True.
Boeing and Northrop and the military. It's
a
the
whole
same
way.
thing. It's become the same
Yeah.
organization. You could probably get posted from the military to Boeing and back to the military, and you wouldn't even consider that you've actually left the military.
Yeah.
It is it's effectively the same thing now, and the big corporations are the same. They obviously don't pay tax, or they don't pay much tax, and they're expanding all around the world. And while it is sad that we have to we have to sort of beg a corporation to do something for truth in geopolitics, I think they're particularly vulnerable to it because Nike are always sponsoring football programs, soccer programs in Taiwan or anywhere, in fact, getting more Muslim women to play soccer or something like that. And they've got lots of feel-good stuff on their website, but you need to call them on it and say, you've tried to be a force for good. What are you doing about the greatest force for good in the world, Julian Assange and truth? And maybe you should make a statement about that rather than just selling us glossy ads about the sort of good work you do around the world. This is a really important thing. Take a stand.
Yeah.
And show us that you're not just trying to sell more shoes.
Take a stand for David McBride as well, because like you said, it's nice. One camp, it's one team, and
that would be nice. And because it is about truth. I'm not trying to put it in. I'm happy for people to make profits. I'm happy for them to, but it's not going to benefit anybody. The sort of like these new age hawks seem to think, oh yeah, when we use all this Israeli technology and we basically lock people down like a sci-fi movie, they think that's going to be good. But they do not know. Haven't they seen Terminator or whatever? They do not know that it's going to cause a revolution. There might only be a small number of us, but the David McBrides in 50 or 60 years' time, not me, security services, don't come around, but my descendants will go to war. If it really does become this horrible new, terribly oppressive, lack of justice. They may have control of 80% of the population, but the other 20% are going to be angry and they're going to be armed and they're going to blow it all up. And it's not going to be some sort of wonderful, peaceful world run by corporations. It's going to be a civil war everywhere.
I think most people have the same opinion. They're opposed to the war in Ukraine. They're opposed to just sending billions and trillions to Ukraine and having a bad relationship with Russia. But they don't show it. They don't want people to know that actually people are scared. People are quite rightly scared because you could get locked away, and we've seen it. There's that journalist you would know in the UK from the Grayzone. And he's only published real information about the truth about Boris Johnson and whatever. And the cops, when he came into Heathrow, they treated him like he was Osama bin Laden. That's the future. They did this to a French journalist also last month, and they asked him if he's a fan of Macron and if he was involved in the protests. And this is in London. I mean, I don't really know too many people who care for Macron, but and I think people don't remember that the Terrorism Act of 2000 is actually something that was created to screw with the Irish, right? It was you could be held for 7 days instead of 1 day without charge, and that's what it came out of.
And this is where the crossover with your world and my world, and it's important. We thought we were pretty clever when we did that. And one of the things that we need, I'm speaking to, if there's any marketing geniuses out there, we need a good marketing genius for sort of human rights, because human rights, it sounds very wishy-washy, and it sounds like, oh yeah, what's that? People that want to, prisoners that want to have 3 meals a day and exercise machines or something. It's but it's anything but, and because there's no adult supervision on. And once you've got a law which says you can hold someone for 7 days, it gets abused. It happened in Australia. We did it too, and they got caught. Someone who was he was a doctor. He was a Muslim doctor, but his cousin was involved in a terrorist incident or something, and they held him for 7 days. And it wouldn't have taken long for them to work out he wasn't involved. He was a fucking doctor, and he really was a doctor, and he was, and yet they if they could have used torture techniques or whatever, but they were doing it probably for political reasons. They get angry, they want to hold someone, and yet it's so short-sighted for someone that who kind of believes in the military. You could, if that guy wasn't a terrorist, after 7 days of being brutalized, without any reason for it, you reckon he might become one. And because all this stuff backfires. It doesn't stop terrorism. It makes terrorism. It makes terrorism. And the idea that you would just start arresting people, and all this stuff that we passed. And at the time, I was like, human rights, that's a bit over the top, and civil liberties. It doesn't sound very sexy, but it does matter because, like that sort of famous poem, I can't remember it, but it's something like, they came for the communists and I didn't care because I wasn't a communist, and they came for and eventually they came for the journalists and I didn't care because I wasn't an investigative journalist, but eventually they will come for you, and don't think that they won't. I am a very middle of the road, middle class guy who went to Oxford University, and my father was famous, went to Sandhurst. I'm not the sort of person you imagine being put in a high security prison for the rest of my life. And so don't think all I did was did my job. There's no suggestion that I actually truly endangered national security. I spoke up because I thought that there were cover-ups and that we'd become highly politicized, and I did it for patriotism. If they're going to put me in jail and make me die in jail, no one is safe. Anyone that actually tries to do the right thing can be a terrorist, and that is a problem, because I'm a patriot, as was Snowden for that matter. He just said, how dare he say that, the head of the NSA shouldn't go on TV and lie to the American public about whether or not
the travesty.
How dare he, And he has to live in Russia now. This is one of the things you forget. Yeah, Russia's the bad. Snowden lives in Russia. He can't go to America.
They cancel his passport.
Bad guys. Yeah,
they can't. They did it on purpose because they know, they can twist it. But
No.
I just wanted to say, you're right. If you actually care about the country and you want a healthy society, then you don't support these things that they're doing, the wars, the corruption, because it only leads to conflict, and it only leads to impoverishment. And
they've got a saying in the law.
It's the opposite of patriotism.
Yeah, a saying in the law. Yeah, that's what makes my skin crawl, because I am more of a patriot. I'm even more of an American patriot than Mike Pompeo, for example. Because I believe in democracy, and I believe in the U.S. Constitution, and I've got lots of good American friends. But it's not patriotism to abuse the law and put people in jail who their only crime was showing that the government committed crime. If the government committed crime, they need their asses kicked, and it's not patriotic to put those whistleblowers in jail. The whistleblowers should be running the military, because they are actually the ones that actually support the Constitution, that support the rule of law. Yes,
especially in your case, because you, David, because you're as you said, Oxford, Sandhurst in the military. And also a lawyer. So you have
I know what
both
the
of
law
these
was.
realms.
I got a pretty good idea, put it that way. Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
And I'm a patriot. One of my deepest ambitions is to go back to the military, and as a consultant, and to help them sort out the issues that made me forced to do what I do. I'm not anti-military. I'm not anti-US.
Right.
I want to see these systems work, but I'm anti-corruption. I'm anti-bullshit. I'm anti false wars that are created just to sell arms and create a diversion to get crappy politicians reelected. And that's what I was brought up on. I don't see myself as a revolutionary. I see myself as someone actually trying to make the establishment work, and to root out the bad guys, because unfortunately, slowly, the bad guys have taken over the bus. We've been hijacked. The US is not run by good people. It's run by the very worst people.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to set that right. I want to see the US thrive, but it can't be the world's most evil regime. It's got to change its ways and actually become a force for good again.
It has to. It has to. And I'd say the same goes for the UK, obviously.
But as it is, I might have to go and live in Russia if I'm ever allowed to leave Australia.
Careful, there's lots of drones flying around Moscow this time of year.
I might get droned. Hillary Clinton might drone me. Oh God. My God. Except they'd probably miss and hit the house next door.
As usual, right? No, but it's always the same story, And I remember during the withdrawal of Afghanistan, even then they tried the same old game, like, oh well, we were following him all day and he was a terrorist.
Yeah,
and then
that's the problem. I mean, mistakes this is the sort of reason. This is why I'm so against them. Mistakes happen, no problem. But the fact that they bald-faced lied about that and said, oh yeah, we got this great terrorist, yeah, fantastic, high fives all around. And then when questions were asked, they maintained their lies, and then it turned out they.
Who creates these terrorists? You notice every time the United States, they kill some ISIS leader in Syria. Guess where he is? He's they're usually in the vicinity of Idlib, which is Turkey, occupied by Turkey, another NATO member. These guys, when it came to the war in Syria, they all the European countries are turning a blind eye and letting all these foreign fighters through and going off into Syria.
And again, if you're old enough like me, I was young at the time, but I remember the Afghan war in the 1980s, when they were sort of sponsoring what they called the Mujahideen, who were really just the forerunners of the Taliban. They were, extreme Islamists who wanted to kill any foreigners, and didn't want any progress. So it's ironic, and yet that caused Afghanistan in the 2000s, because we smashed the country so badly, and we gave anybody who said, I will kill Russians for you. We gave them Stinger missiles. We gave them money,
It's true.
And then they had to suddenly, when the Russians left, they had to run around madly and pay 10 times the price of Stinger missiles to get them off the very people they'd given them to.
What do you think is going to happen in Ukraine?
They created a monster. Yeah, we created Osama bin Laden, us and the Saudis. And that's what's going to happen in Ukraine. We're not going to let the neo-Nazis take over. And once if the Russians go, and they probably will eventually, after a 10-year horrible war, and where Ukraine is in ruins, we're going to have these crazy people, a bit like Syria. I could see it happening again in Syria, who are like disgruntled, who are armed, have got money, and they're going to go to the US and blow up buildings in the US. And it's not going to be Ukraine's fault. It's going to be the US's fault, because this is they've reaped the whirlwind, as they say. We've created this thing, and it's going to come back and bite us. We've created this crazy snake, and we think it's going to attack the Russians, but it could just as easily attack us. You
notice how these terrorists, they always have files and photographs of them, and within 10 minutes they say, oh yeah, it's that guy, who they've sort of been getting on board for a while, and turning into an asset.
And we don't even have to guess, because we can see what happened in Afghanistan in the 1980s.
Right. That's a prime example.
We've seen this movie before.
We have.
And, and all these people we were arming bin Laden. He was our buddy because he fought Russians, and the Russians even said to us, that this guy and people like him will eventually come for you. And we were like, oh, well, we're the free people. They'd never come for us. But sure enough, they didn't think we were free. They thought we were corrupt, and they came for us. And that's right.
But David,
Azov battalion.
Right. You said that
you don't like America.
I'll tell you one thing. The Nazis in Ukraine, they were recruited and run by the CIA, like even after I think it started in 1948, if I'm not mistaken. And so when you say that they're going to get rid of them, I really don't know. I have very severe doubts, to put it mildly.
It won't be popular for them to take over. So, I mean, just the CIA being the CIA, they will double cross them eventually when they've outlived their usefulness. They will double cross them, and of course they will come for the CIA. That's the problem when you've got people on your side who don't really have any values, don't really have any morals, who are basically criminals working for you. When you lie down with dogs, as they say, you get up with fleas. And these guys will eventually double cross each other and eventually start fighting each other, because they're not motivated by doing the right thing. They're motivated by some sort of weird violence and sort of short-term revenge. And they are not people who can be trusted in the long run. And they will eventually, the CIA don't play fair. I mean, they're eventually going to turn on each other, and it's going to be a sort of carnage. And it's a carnage created by very short-term thinking, where all they really care about is winning the next US election. And that is not a good way to try to run the world. And that's one of the problems with the Iraq war. George Bush would have been thrown out in the 2004 election unless he'd gone to war. And that was probably the only reason they went. And it would have the amount of million people dead, 20, 30 million people displaced. And then, of course, you see it even in then, because then Syria was the same. On one hand, they were starting a war in Syria. And on the other hand, they were outraged that there were all these Syrian refugees trying to get to Europe. And
who created the refugees?
Didn't connect the dots and say, this is what happens. This is a situation you created. And how dare you now sort of be outraged and sort of like say, no, stay in Syria.
Apparently they're the invaders. Not the CIA, not MI6, not the SAS, not the British Army, the Americans. No, it's a bunch of civilians. Refugees are the invaders.
They create these situations,
upside down world,
short-term goal, and then they complain about the situation that they've created, and having to mop up, pretty much everything from Osama bin Laden to these sort of attacks in England. After when they were bombing ISIS, everything is actually, you can draw back to US aggression in these foreign countries to begin with, and it comes back to bite them eventually. It all starts with them overextending themselves, and and thinking that it's clever and giving money to dodgy people and doing terrible things. And then, of course, they get attacked. And then they blame the people that attack them. But it's not that hard to trace the origins of attacks on America and attacks on Britain to attacks they have made on other countries without justification.
Look at Libya as well, by the way. The list is so long, Somalia, etc.
Libya, they've turned it into a sort of prehistoric country with slave markets and they thought they were being clever,
Yeah, but Gaddafi was more evil, so
No, yeah, of course.
Of course.
That's right, and they get away with it. They simply cannot handle anyone who successfully has a different system to them, And this is, again, one of the sort of peace missions I want to say. We need to be able to accept that and it's so hypocritical. We do business with the Saudis, who are the most sort of repressive or hardline Islamic regime, and there's no problem with the Saudis. They even cut up Khashoggi and tricked him and cut him up, and that we don't have a problem with that. But we cannot deal with the Taliban because of their hardline principles. I mean, the hypocrisy is disgusting. It's really
you can chop up journalists, but no barrel bombs.
Yeah, exactly. We can't. And of course, they're setting themselves up for an Afghanistan Mark V, but by cutting off the Taliban from any foreign aid and for refusing to, letting their children starve, etc.
Yeah, and then they say they're failed states. They're not failed states.
Make them a failed state, and they're going to have to seek money from somewhere. So where are they going to go?
Opium, probably. I don't know. Yeah, but the thing is, if you look at opium in Afghanistan, it skyrocketed after the invasion.
One of the things that turned my blood was because I was there. I was one of the few people to be in Afghanistan in 2000 when the Taliban were running it, and the Taliban did destroy they did destroy the opium, even though they could have made money over it, because Mullah Omar said he thought about it and he said it's un-Islamic. It's going to cause Islamic people to die.
I see.
And he was the only one tough enough to actually put it through. And of course, we denied that. We pretended that he wasn't in charge. We sort of said, the Northern Alliance are the real government, even though that wasn't true on the ground. And then when we invaded, opium came back again. And yet we still managed to paint them as the bad guys, the opium dealers, whatever. But it was us. It was us, the opium dealers. And they had tried to, and we never gave them any credit. And also we saw in 2000, we saw the starving people because they'd had some famines in 1998, 1999. We saw the Afghans, a lot of them were starving and their kids were dying of hunger. And we refused to give them any aid. This is one of the reasons why they blew up those Buddhas. They were so outraged that they weren't going to blow the Buddhas up because they were hoping to get tourists to come in to see them. But they were outraged that, I think it was the Japanese, said they would give them billions of dollars to fix the Buddhas, but they wouldn't give them a cent to feed their children, And that's outrageous. And they just thought that was outrageous. They just thought we were the most disgusting sort of people, that we were happy to see their children die because they didn't enforce human rights. So we'll let them die. That's our punishment for them not, living under Western standards. But we will give them money to fix statues, because that's important to us, They don't need propaganda and brainwashing. All they needed was the truth, because it showed just how full of shit we were. We didn't care about Afghans. We didn't care. Plenty of famine doesn't discern between gender. Plenty of women died because they were starving, and baby girls. We didn't care. We didn't care about that.
Where are their human rights?
Yeah, but we didn't like their human rights record, so we weren't going to give them food.
I'll never understand this logic of, punish the entire civilian population because we don't like 10 people in a cabinet.
Oh, yeah, and
it's evil.
Outrageous. There's no sense in it, and the media need to get and kick up the button to start.
They do
on it, because hypocrisy to say.
This is why we need people like you, Dave.
And it doesn't even work, you look what happened. We thought we were being clever with, Afghanistan in the year 2000 and didn't give them any food or didn't give them any aid. And then next thing you know, you have 9/11 and you have 20 years of war. So it doesn't even work, Hypocrisy and lies will only create more war. And it's hard not to agree with Julian Assange to say, they're not trying to end the wars. They just want endless war, because endless war is profitable and turns public money into private money. And while if you said that to me 20 years ago, I would have said, well, that's a little bit extreme. I don't know that's true. But having seen what I've seen, I think that's actually true. And that's, that's a disgrace. And the Nike government, the Nike company,
why not?
All the corporations, they should be speaking up, because that cannot be good for business. It might be good for business if you sell bombs, but there's a whole lot of businesses that don't really benefit from war, and those businesses should be speaking up and saying, "Look, why don't we concentrate on healthcare? Why don't we concentrate on lifting the Americans people out of poverty?" And that might be a better thing to concentrate on war. Yes, McDonnell Douglas and Grumman and all these people, they might make less of a profit, but too bad, because selling bombs, the problem is that bombs get dropped, they kill people, and it creates death and sadness. And we've become that snake biting its own tail. Eventually we will die.
Dave, it's like you said before, we're just by saying what you said, that lift people out of poverty, give them health care. I don't know why this is radical, but just by saying these things, that makes you more of an American, an American patriot, quote unquote, than Mike Pompeo. Easily.
Yeah, exactly. I care more about America.
It's true,
because Twitter's quite you've only got so many characters on Twitter. You could have to say, the US is bad, but I love the American people. I want to be able to go there.
This is a deflection. This is, you hate the West, you hate America or something. That's absolutely rubbish. The people who hate the West are the ones starting these wars. They take the money of everyone in the West and spend it on bombs to murder people
if we had
and enrich themselves.
If we had an accurate movie about the US at the moment, the villains would be the bad guys in the US government, That's why I can't handle anything where
But they used to have Leslie Nielsen. I don't know if anyone will remember. He'll burst in, and then there's all there's Khomeini and all the quote unquote evil leaders at the table. It's so comical. It's really comical.
I know, but it's really the bad guys of the world are in Washington DC.
Unfortunately,
they're not patriots. They're there to make them, they're not. Dick Cheney's. They're there to make themselves rich.
Yep.
And I'd happily go and work for Robert Kennedy Jr. for his campaign. Another one of my many dreams is helping him get elected. I've got a lot of American friends, and that's I'd love to go and help clean it up, because it could be great. I'm not anti-American at all. I'm anti-crook. I'm anti-criminal, and we need to clean the place up. And I'm very excited by Robert Kennedy's platform, and I think he calling the bullshit on the foreign wars and various other things. I think he really good.
Yeah, I think that might be him. I saw one clip, and I'm not too familiar with him. I think that might be the one. I think it was about NATO. He was doing some conference or something. But I haven't watched all of it.
That we say. Yeah, he sort of says, yeah, look, we need to stop the foreign wars. We need to start telling the truth. We need to go to do healthcare. I mean, all sorts of stuff that if you had any sensible person would think is hardly radical.
Yeah, I it's
good to see that there are some people out there. Tulsi Gabbard's another one. She seems very sensible. She's someone that's actually been in the military. It shows you, all the crappy phony patriots like Pompeo. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard's actually been in the military.
She's a major.
She was a major like me. She's a mother. She's someone that actually has some credibility, who's actually fought for her country, not like all these phonies in Washington. And she's anti these ridiculous wars. Anyway, she's like me. She's put on a uniform, so she's not anti-soldier, but she's anti-bullshit wars.
Yeah, but Dave, I'll tell you something, and I've said this before. I don't necessarily agree with everything she says, but the stuff about the wars, she because she criticizes that. They were starting to call her I think it was Hillary Clinton saying she's like a Russian asset or something. She's a major. I think they would have known that whether she's a Russian asset or not by now. The amount of background checks.
Exactly.
It's just lunacy. Like, what does this even mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm a Russian. I actually have been to Russia. I've been to Vladivostok when we were doing the documentaries. But yeah, I mean, I laugh because I'm probably a Russian Chinese asset. Anyone that criticizes them, I think that was one of the greatest tweets of all time. Was that Tulsi Gabbard?
Oh right, I remember now. The
Queen of Warmongers.
It was a legendary tweet. It was
Hillary. She's such a hapless fool. She could. I don't know. I think it's a parody account, but it's kind of real. Where she's. The Taliban even burned her. They say, you're just complete failure in everything you do.
No, I got to give her credit for that tweet. That was quite
pretty,
Queen of Warmongers.
Pretty funny, and
she definitely is.
You still see Hillary Clinton get wheeled out to comment on affairs, and I just every time I see her now with a microphone in her pantsuit, I want to say,
"Oh my God,
what about your the Great Pied Piper plan?"
Yeah,
it turns out
she wanted Trump. She wanted
Trump in the White House.
Yeah, she thought he's such an idiot that she's going to lose.
Talk about poetic justice.
Oh my God, they're both clowns, if you ask me.
I know
that was just poetic justice.
He's a clown, but it does make you laugh because that's her idea of strategy. It didn't work very well.
Wow. All of her politics.
My dog's getting a bit upset now. I might have to take him out for a walk. He's like...
You do that, Dave. Again, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure. And I'm going to plug your Twitter on the screen so people can find it. What's your handle again?
Murdoch Cadell.
Murdoch Cadell. Okay, yeah. Give me a second.
But if you just put in Major David McBride, I think it comes up. But MURDOCHCADEL. And there's a picture of me with my dog, I
think. There we go.
There he is.
That's the one.
That's the one, yeah.
All right, I'm zoomed all the way in there, and I've highlighted it there. You guys definitely go follow David McBride, and then I'm gonna do everything I can to shine shine some light on your case and Julian's case, and anytime there's an update, please, you have an open invitation, Dave, so please come on whenever you feel like it.
I'm glad.
The podium is yours.
Radio show. We might have to have you on that one, though.
That would be very nice.
Quite well known out here now.
Oh,
and
lovely.
A lot of our little clips that we've done together, they get circulated. My Australian fans on Twitter have circulated our first interview, saying this is one of the best interviews that David's done because we have a chance to go in depth about it. And so it's good for you.
Very nice.
Good for me. It gives you some audience out here.
True.
So
true. Again, thank you so much, Dave.
Will this be on a podcast where people can download?
Yes, it will. Yeah. If you type Richard Medhurst on whatever Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you'll find it. It's just type Richard Medhurst, and every single episode that I do is there, whether it's video or otherwise.
Yeah. Well, you keep up the good work.
I will, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right.
I'll
take care,
the dog
Dave.
for a walk. And
yes.
Lovely to talk to you.
Likewise.
Thanks for watching.
Okay, I see we've got about wait, it's not showing me now. Let me refresh. I already can't read most of the comments, but you guys tell me where you're tuning in from, what city, what state, what town, what galaxy. Please let me know in the comments, because you sounded off the first time and I didn't get a chance to read through everything. So there we go. Now it's coming in. Pittsburgh, Hungary, Australia, Sweden, inner space, Barcelona, Newcastle, Ivory Tower, Malaysia. It's too fast. See, we've got a lot of people from Australia and New Zealand that is tuned in. Ireland, Stockholm, Alaska. That's it. We've got to get the globe and try to have it ding every time. Thank you guys very much. I'm not done yet. I've still got a lot of things to talk about. So let's run through them quickly. Just let me get something to drink very quickly. You guys get something to drink, and then we'll reconvene in about just a minute. There are two really important topics I wanted to talk about: Trump and so on. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Sweden wanted to join NATO. They broke with their decades-long neutral stance. Turkey was one of the only countries, I think, along with Hungary, that was saying, we're not going to let you in, because you need to have consensus, right? You need all the members in NATO to say, okay, you can join. Their bid has kind of been in limbo because Turkey wanted to, extract several concessions. It was very clear that they really want to join NATO in Sweden, and they were doing everything they could to appease the Turks. And then this moron comes in front of the Turkish embassy and burns the Quran. I understand that in their point of view, this is freedom of expression, and you're in Sweden, you can do whatever you like. But you have to remember that if you're trying to get Turkey support, maybe you wait until after you've gotten it. I mean, this is just dumb from a diplomatic level. They're doing everything to appease Turkey, and then because of one idiot, they let this go to waste. The Germans and the Americans have decided that it would be a good idea to send Ukraine tanks. German tanks against the Russian. Man, I'm perplexed by this. What do they think is going to happen? Because even if you can train the Ukrainian crews who are used to Soviet tanks to operate British tanks, and then you got to train them to operate German tanks, and then you got to train them to operate American tanks, and that's if they can even maintain the logistical supply line to work with these tanks to keep them running. What kind of door are you opening now for the Russians to do? I mean, this is very clearly escalation. While Germany and the US are saying, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine tanks, the doomsday clock has been moved to 90 seconds to midnight. So this is basically, it's a measurement of how close we are to the end of the world, to the apocalypse, to annihilating the planet with nuclear weapons, right? And this is the closest it's ever been to midnight, okay? Midnight representing the end. Ukraine's most senior military commander has said that his forces need about 300 Western tanks. Over the last year, NATO allies in Eastern Europe supplied Ukraine with Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks that have been ground down or destroyed in constant fighting. Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks. Now, Ukraine, having been a Soviet satellite state and part of the Soviet Union, it was part of Russia, all of its military personnel being trained on Russian tanks. What do you think they're going to do with American tanks or German tanks, which they are not trained to operate? The Ukrainians know how to operate Russian tanks. That's all they know how to operate. The Ukrainians only used Soviet stuff, right? Until the last couple of years and until now. You know, this is the first major influx of NATO weapons. And again, NATO's been training Ukrainian forces, but Challenger tanks, this is brand new. If they can't even use the tanks that they're trained to use, what makes you so confident they're going to know how to use a Leopard 2 or an M1A2 or a Challenger 2? Man, people train on those things for fucking months and years. Both of these home secretaries, okay, Suella Braverman and Priti Patel, both their parents came to the United Kingdom, and under their own laws as home secretary, they themselves would not have been able to come to the UK, to be born in the UK, and to have a life there. So like the hypocrisy is so disgusting, you know, like I got what I wanted, I'm okay, I'm secure, I can live in the UK, I'm the home secretary now I'm gonna shut the gates. Now I'm going to screw people that have literally nothing, that are so desperate they're, you know, risking drowning in the Channel or the Mediterranean Sea. People have to resort to risking drowning. They have to resort to, you know, hiding in trucks or swimming across the Channel, if everyone's ever done that, crossing the Channel because of her policies, because she forces people into doing that, right? So you literally have no choice. You have to be in the UK to begin the application. What are people supposed to do? Just teleport, you know, for 5 minutes, write down the form and just get out of the UK? This is ridiculous. She's a liar, just like the one, her predecessor, Priti Patel. Why is Germany reluctant to give the Ukrainians tanks? That's a really tough one. I wonder why. Germany has long refused to send its most potent weapons to countries in conflict, a byproduct of its legacy of starting World War II and World War I. That's horse manure, because Germany does send weapons to countries in war. Saudi Arabia is one of them. So to get around this, the trick that they use is they don't sell the tanks and the ordnance directly to Saudi Arabia. They move it to Italy, and then from Italy they sell it to the Saudis. So they basically just insert a middleman, and that's how they get around this very, honorable principle of theirs, which they never abide by. If you go and you look up the Yemen war, I mean, you're going to see weapons from fucking everywhere. You know, the Canadians have been selling weapons and making money. Britain, the US, Australia, everyone. And the Germans are no exception. So I mean, the idea is true, but they fucking send weapons. They goddamn do. They do. Do you see how they move like snakes? Do you see how they move like snakes? They get the media to whisper in your ear, "Oh, don't go on strike. No, don't strike. It'll cripple the economy." Oh. No, it's not, like giving the army 800 billion to fucking bomb, 20 countries. That's okay. That money, we can spare that. But if you go on strike where, oh my God, we're going to lose like 2 billion a day, well, we can't afford that. You know the Pentagon has been audited, I think 5 times now, and every single audit was failed. That means they don't know where the money's going. The Pentagon is like a black fucking hole that sucks trillions of dollars, and the government doesn't even know where the money's going. I can tell you where it's going. You don't need to audit the Pentagon. I can tell you, me, Richard Medhurst, that money is going towards drug deals, towards arms sales, towards arms purchases, towards CIA fucking budgets and embassy coffee. That's where that shit is going, man. That shit is going to the spooks. That shit's going to the bombers. That shit's going to the paramilitaries. That's where it's going. You don't need to scratch your head. That's where it's going. And apparently that's an acceptable loss. That's an acceptable use of American dollars and taxpayer dollars. But, going on strike, oh, that's too much of an inconvenience. That's the fucking point, man. And we're back. Can you guys see me? I seem to be out of focus. Confound it. This is all of hold on. There we go. All right, much better. So let's get down to business and talk about what just happened. So So my name's Richard Medhurst. I'm one of the journalists covering the Assange case for the last couple of years, and I wanted to share a new update with you. So Julian Assange, at the moment, has had his appeal denied. Now, the higher court approved the extradition from the UK to the US, and just on a few days ago, on June 6th, you had a high court judge called Chief Justice. What did I say? Chief Justice? Just Sir Jonathan Swift. I think his name's already long enough. There you go. So I posted a thread about it, right? So what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, Julian Assange, he still can appeal, and his wife Stella, she has said that they will be appealing on Tuesday. So that's on June 13th, and there's usually a 5-day limit in order to appeal. So his lawyers are taking care of that. And down here on the thread that I made, basically they denied Julian's appeal on 8 grounds. Now, just to be clear, this is basically they denied him permission to appeal. Okay, so you must first seek just permission to have everybody come back in the chamber, the judges, and go through the case again. So that's not what happened. You just had one judge looking at the reasons, the arguments that Julian would present, or Assange's legal team would present, and he didn't deem them adequate enough in order to allow an appeal. So again, this case can get very confusing, because what happened initially when you had the first ruling, right? That judge was Judge Beretzer, and this is in the lower court. Okay, that was very good for Julian Assange, because she ruled in his favor. She said that the prisons in the US are so bad, and that plus the fact that he's suicidal, he's gonna commit suicide if he's extradited, and only on health grounds did she block it. So if he were perfectly healthy, she would have shipped him off to the US. So the Americans, meaning now Joe Biden's administration, because they inherited the case from Donald Trump's administration, and as you can see, there's not much difference in how they think. Joe Biden's administration said they will appeal that first decision, and then Julian lost, right? So he went to the higher court and he lost. So now Julian is the one appealing, right? I just wanted to kind of recap this in case it's not clear. And of course, I'm simplifying things. If you want to have the full, detailed thing, I have multiple playlists on the channel every single day, every court date, explaining what happened, what was said, and so on. But right now, where we're at, because you have to understand, for a whole year, really for the better part of a year, Julian Assange has kind of just been sitting in prison, and this is his 4th year in Belmarsh, right? He's just sitting there. There's no news about the case, and what makes it even weirder is that it's not like you have health restrictions or some kind of really urgent public health crisis that like in the past forced everybody to take a huge break and so on. But of course, these are very, very complex matters, and there were 8 reasons why Julian and his legal team wanted to appeal. And so keep in mind, because I said July 2022, right? And we are in June, so it's been almost here. And the judge said that basically, he doesn't accept these arguments. Now, there are 8 arguments. I'm gonna give all of them to you in the coming days, but what we had here is basically that Julian's team were accusing the U.S. prosecution of being biased, right? Being too political. Now, when we say U.S. prosecution, you have to understand that these are not lawyers that have flown in from the United States. I mean, they are English, okay? Just so you understand, they're English barristers, but who are fighting this case on behalf of the DOJ. So that was one reason, and then another one was that his extradition violated the U.S.-UK extradition treaty. I should have capitalized that, by the way, because it is it's a formal name, and this is something that was made in 2003. Okay, so yeah, you have to think this is right around the time where the war, when Iraq, the war in Iraq started, the invasion of Iraq, and the so-called war on terror. So this was basically something where the UK just wanted to make it easier for the United States to ship people off from Britain to whatever hellhole they were going to be in, the US. Okay, it's not the only reason that they did it, but it's one of the reasons. You have to understand that the United States have these with almost every country that they can that they can manage. So yes, me personally, and again, I know people like to interpret the law in different ways and so on, but his extradition absolutely violates the extradition treaty, because Section 91 is about health. So already there, the guy is not well, and he's not, and Julian Assange is unwell because of this, not prosecution only, but also persecution. So you have to consider that this is not a case that's been going on for 4 years. This is we're talking a decade of people, governments, right? So state actors trying to target Julian Assange, inflicting upon him stress, depression, mental illness, and so on, and that's why he is in the state. And he also had a mini stroke. Okay, so I mean, mental is, your brain is obviously part of your body, but people like to say mental and physical separately. So what my point is that he's having both health issues, and these have been, brought upon by this, right? They've been brought on by this decade-long persecution. So I agree with the lower court judge on that alone, on Section 91, that this is it's just very, very bad for his health. And then on top of that, if I'm not mistaken, Section 40 is it prohibits extraditions concerning political cases. So if you know that Assange is going to be brought to the United States and put on trial for a political crime, meaning something that isn't really a crime, or that he's maybe accused of having done XYZ, but only because that government hates him, then you cannot allow the extradition. You must not allow the extradition because it is, it's political, right? It's unfair. There's no due process. This person stands no chance of getting a fair trial, and that is certainly the case with Julian. He stands no chance of getting a fair trial. As a matter of fact, this is something that you have to consider. He's not going to be, brought into something like you've seen in the movies, where he's like brought into a room and you have 12 random civilians sitting there who will see him for just being a publisher, and that's it. No. People in the United States have been poisoned against Julian, and if you consider the vicinity and the jurisdiction of this court, so this is the Eastern District Court in the Eastern District of Virginia. This is where you have the CIA, and so you have CIA agents and or their family members or friends who are going to be in whatever potential jury. Okay. Now another thing is that if you're indicted under the Espionage Act, you're also not allowed any public interest defense, right? So, for example, you You publish these documents because you had to stop an asteroid from hitting the Earth, just as an example. It's not allowed. You're not allowed to argue this in court. You be quiet. That's how it works. And in this case, you know, Julian Assange, what was he doing with these Iraq and Afghanistan documents? Very simple. He's showing, look, the government, the US government and their allies are killing people, murdering them, killing journalists, killing civilians, kidnapping people, torturing them, rendering them. So this is absolutely in the interest of the general public. I mean, any normal, sane person would agree. And so he wouldn't even be allowed to utter my last two sentences as an argument in court. So, I mean, by definition, this is, I mean, you can also argue under, you know, the European Convention on Human Rights that he's not going to get a fair trial, which, you know, under British common law, he won't get his due process, etc., etc. And again, that it's political means that he doesn't get a fair trial. So these two things are connected, right? You cannot be a political prisoner and have a fair trial. It's, you know, it's kind of those are two polar opposites, right? So just another thing here that Assange's team wanted to argue is that, you know, he's being targeted because Assange is being targeted and prosecuted for protected speech. Right, so this was very important, and in an extradition, if you're taking someone from, you know, the United Kingdom to the United States, and you're accusing them of a certain crime, it has to be a crime in both countries. Okay, so where I'm going with this is that in the United States, you have actually. You on paper, at least on paper, not in practice, but on paper, you do have much stronger protections for free speech than most countries. Whether that's actually, you know, applied in real life is a completely different issue. But my point here is that the irony is that, you know, out of all the countries in the world, in a utopia, the United States will be one of the last places where Julian Assange would be prosecuted. In an ideal world, in a utopia. And why? Because the First Amendment, etc., right? And the First Amendment is very simple to understand. I think even some Americans, a lot of Americans don't understand what it says and what it is. There's no like special amendment or clause for journalists. If you are a human being and you speak, that's it. You have free speech and you're, you know, it's protected in the United States, and that's it, period. So, you know, whether Julian Assange is printing the documents out or publishing them on the internet, it's completely irrelevant what medium, you know, he chooses to use and how he does it in one language. He's protected. So even the irony here is that under U.S. law, the fact that you're prosecuting him is even a greater affront under U.S. law than in most countries, right? But in any case, there were 8 points, and I'll get all of them for you shortly. The thing here that I wanted to underscore is that, as I said, this thing is extremely arduous and slow, very, very slow. And there's an email I showed you once, and if I'm not mistaken, please feel free to correct me. It was Jake Sullivan, who I think is now, well, I know now is Biden's national security advisor. But in any case, it was one of the, you know, the DC hawks, sending an email saying that, you know, the idea is to have Julian Assange kind of running or on the run from one jurisdiction to the next, or, you know, being hunted. And the you know, the message behind that being that we want to inflict slow pain on Julian, you know, on a long-term basis. I think he said something like for the next 25 years. And very, you know, sadly enough, that very much seems to be the case. You know, as I told you, whether now it's 10, but whether 10 or 25, same point. These legal cases are so long. You know, even if you you have every defense in the world, and the best lawyers, and you got the best witness testimonies, and you know, many of these things Julian certainly has, right? Doesn't matter. It's slow, and that takes a toll on your health. No matter who you are, right? That takes a toll on your health. So just by bringing the case or continuing Donald Trump's case, you know, they're inflicting pain, even if they lose. And they did lose. The first ruling was a loss for the United States, no extradition. But of course, you know, they immediately, it was the next morning. I was at both things. Actually, 2 days later, there's a bail hearing. Same judge in a different court, Westminster Magistrates Court. And, you know, she said that Assange is a flight risk and he's not even allowed to be with his family, even though she just said that he can go free, which is weird. So she put him in, like, you know, category A prison. A journalist, right? Like, we're not talking about Pablo Escobar or something, or, you know, a serial killer. I always think of these moments, right? And I say to myself, the pen is mightier than the sword. But again, it's easy to you know, to say these things. At the end of the day, the guy still, his health is deteriorating. So, you know, what I covered, this was kind of my specialty, if I may say so, in not just covering this case, but one specific point is that, you know, the expose, the investigative journalism that I did for David Mendoza. Why is that so important? Because the extradition of Julian Assange, it hinges entirely on one thing. It all depends on the idea that you can trust the United States, right? Because the United States gave a diplomatic note saying that they will, you know, provide such and such amenities to Julian Assange. Again, I've gone through them a million times. Basically, they said, oh, he can go to jail or serve out his term in Australia to be home, like, yeah, in a prison. And that, you know, they will give him adequate medical treatment contingent on whatever physician they pick and that physician's diagnosis, etc., right? So the completely abstract. It's like you're looking at a contract. It's not even a contract. You know, that's the point I was going to get to. But it's like it's something you cannot trust. It's so ambiguous. It can be interpreted in a million ways. How on earth you could trust such a document? I don't know. But let me give you. I'll give you one better. You know, there is someone who got not just a diplomatic note, but an actual contract, like signed by the United States, by Uncle Sam, or in this case, Kimberly Weiss, who is the an employee of the U.S. Embassy in Madrid, right, in Spain. So Spanish government, the U.S. government, and David Mendoza, the guy being extradited from Spain to the U.S., they all signed a contract that once the you know, the case is over and he's sentenced, if he's sentenced, he serves the term in Spain. They broke the contract, right? It's not a promise or a verbal note. It's a contract written. I published it. It's on my Substack. All three signed it. And for years and years and years, he's battling them. And all of this, just to say that the United States cannot be trusted. Here, where's the proof? Here's the proof. It's on my Substack. It's the contract given to David Mendoza, signed by the United States government, signed by the Spanish government, signed by himself, which they did not honor. So I have proof that you cannot trust the U.S. government, specifically on the matter of extraditions. So how can you allow this extradition of Julian Assange from the UK to the US based on the notion that, oh, the Americans gave us a verbal note so we can trust them that they'll take care of Julian? No, you can't. You cannot trust them. right? You're hoping that you're thinking that you can trust him, right? But you're speculating. I, on the other hand, I have actual proof. You can hold it. It's tangible. 6 years he's battling to get home. And the only reason they sent him home in the end is because he found a copy of the original contract, which they would not give him. They said it's diplomatic notes, so therefore it's classified, even though he fucking signed it. It's classified. Sorry. So he got a copy, and then he sued Eric Holder, who was Obama's attorney general, and when he did that, they were like, "Oh, okay, you can go away now, but you have to drop the suit." So in any case, I think it's outrageous that Julian's still in prison. That his extradition is allowed based on what? On what? On what? An assumption, a hope that you can trust the Department of Justice to fulfill their oath, to be, like a little less harsh on Julian Assange. He shouldn't even be extradited in the first place. What crime has he committed? No crime. Espionage. That's what's scary, man. As a judge, she found equivalence. That's what she did. She basically, like I told you like 10 minutes ago, in order to extradite someone from country A to country B, the crime that they're accused of must be under law a crime in both countries. If you're in country A and country B wants you, and they're accusing you of some crime, which isn't even a crime here, why the hell would you send that person there? Like, makes no sense. But that's the thing, right? Because she found a way. The judge found a way to say, like, no. Actually, publishing these documents, oh yeah, this would have been a violation under the Official Secrets Act. Oh, and this too, and this too, and this too. Like 17 counts. But because he's depressed, because you guys are like half killing him, I will not allow the extradition. Oh, okay. Well, how noble of you, Your Honor. We don't say that in England. But anyway, the point here is that this is a very, very shady case. I'm sorry to say. And shady, I'm being very, very generous now, right? Far more generous, perhaps, than any of the aforementioned persons are deserving. Assange excluded, and Mendoza. Really, I this behavior, what they're doing here, I'm being too kind. I'm being too kind. This is scandalous behavior. Like, again, you have to consider 175 years. Man, I don't care if he shot the president. What do you mean 175 years? To be honest, when you think of the IRA, like how badly they got treated as well, and many were released after with the Good Friday Agreement, but you had guys like serving 11 life sentences, 11. So like they would have to die 11 times in prison just to get out. I mean, it's just madness. I don't know how you can have justice and quantify it in such terms. In any case, that was when it comes to the European Court of Human Rights, you have to keep in mind that Julian Assange can go there if all else fails in the UK. And keep in mind, this appeal that he's going to file on Tuesday will be in front of two new judges, okay? Two new judges, not the same ones that we had in the High Court. And I'm talking from last year, right, where they allowed the extradition. Different ones. That's the whole point, right? You get perhaps fresh minds and fresh takes on it. But if they say no again, or rather they say yes to the extradition, is what I'm saying. If they say yes, then it's over for him in the UK. So my point is that this is the last attempt Julian has to get free in the UK in the British judicial system, or the English and Welsh one, and then he has to go to the European Court of Human Rights. And some of you might be thinking, well, hold on, what about Brexit? I thought the UK left the European Union. Yes, but this is the Council of Europe, which is different. Okay, so
nothing has changed on that front. In any case, you know, I put all of this up on the thread and tried my best to you know, put it really concisely, because this is a complex case. At the root of it, it's not that complex. The guy's a journalist. He published documents they don't like. Now they want to half kill him and put him in jail for like 200 years. What? See, only takes one sentence. But because I'm covering this from the court, and I'm reporting to you what's happening and giving you my analysis, both. You know, it can be overwhelming to understand, especially if you're new, because you're like, wait, which what? So please go watch the playlist and just bear in mind, I have, I think, 2 playlists minimum. The first one would be the lower court, which I was talking about earlier. So that's the one that lasted about 4 weeks. And then obviously once the Americans lost, where did they go? They went to the high court. So the high court, and even in the high court, remember, you have all these preliminary hearings, so to speak. Like basically you have judges like here looking at why someone wants to appeal, on what grounds, and then saying, okay, you can proceed, okay, or no, we don't want you to proceed. This is where we're at. I think Julian has a mailing address, which I'll put in the description and down below. So send him a letter, give him some support. All right, lend him your support and courage. So he definitely needs it all the time. Crazy Puppet. Hello, Crazy Puppet. The Crazy Puppet says that in a perfect world, we would have we would have had a chance to become. Sorry, I'm. Sometimes I think I'm assuming in the super chat there's not enough space, so you guys start like compressing the words, and I can't read it here. In a perfect world, GE would have a chance to become a world-renowned hero. In this world, he is a hero to uneducated anti-vaxxers, radicals, etc. Here we are. I'm really sorry, but you've lost me. I can't. Crazy Puppet, I'm watching the chat, so please tell me, because I did not understand whatsoever. Indy says, pray for Julian. Definitely. And the yellow ribbons for Assange. That's very good. Kiara, thank you very much for your kind comment. Oh, you mean Julian. I'm so sorry. Now I understand. So the Crazy Puppet said, in a perfect world, Julian Assange would have a chance to become a world-renowned hero. In this world, he is a hero to quote-unquote uneducated anti-vaxxers, radicals, etc. Here we are. Yeah, I get what you're saying. They try to like pigeonhole him and label him as some kind of crackpot and oh yeah, he's one of those people, etc. He's uneducated, or he's Russian. Today the persistent, and for the last 100 years, the persistent smear is Russian agent. So but I would add this: he already is a world-renowned hero. It's just we don't hear too much about it in the media, right? I think he's, I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I speak with certain, with a high degree of certainty. The guy has like really tons of journalism prizes and so on. Thank you, F Liu, for the donation, and thank you, Crazy Puppet, again. I saw you in the chat and I understood it all of a sudden. He is a hero, and David McBride, who I was privileged to speak with just earlier. I hope you caught that, Crazy Puppet. David McBride is actually also Australian. He's just like Julian, and these guys are heroes. I'll tell you why, because Australia, even though it's not in Europe, it's not in North America, It's in the southern hemisphere. It's still considered global north or, a Western country, right? And, the mentality there and the institutions there, they're just the same, right? As in England and so on, especially especially close to Britain. And it's very difficult to do these sorts of things, whistleblowing, and because the way that it's viewed is that you are a traitor, not in the sense, oh, you're a Russian, this and that. No. It's like you're betraying your own kind because you are upper middle class, you're well educated, like McBride, I was just speaking to him, he went to Oxford, Sandhurst. Again, for those of you who I think you know what Oxford is. It's the top one of the top unis, Sandhurst is kind of like the West Point of the UK. It's the officer school, right? So if you don't want to be a quote unquote grunt, you would go to Sandhurst and come out as an officer. So Cat Kiss in the comments says Anglosphere. Absolutely. And, it's still part of the Commonwealth. It goes without saying, in New Zealand and so on. I mean, our flag is literally on their flag. So, what more do I have to say? But my point is that, it's a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to do. So, let's continue. Just give me a second, and we'll be right back.
Sweden wanted to join NATO. They broke with their decades-long neutral stance. Turkey was one of the only countries, I think, along with Hungary, that was saying, we're not going to let you in because you need to have consensus, right? You need all the members in NATO to say, okay, you can join. Their bid has kind of been in limbo because Turkey wanted to, extract several concessions. It was very clear that they really want to join NATO in Sweden, and they were doing everything they could to appease the Turks. And then this moron comes in front of the Turkish embassy and burns the Quran. I understand that in their point of view, this is freedom of expression, and you're in Sweden, you can do whatever you like. But you have to remember that if you're trying to get Turkey support, maybe wait until after you've gotten it. I mean, this is just dumb from a diplomatic level. They're doing everything to appease Turkey, and then because of one idiot, they let this go to waste. The Germans and the Americans have decided that it would be a good idea to send Ukraine tanks. German tanks against the Russian. Man, I'm perplexed by this. What do they think is going to happen? Because even if you can train the Ukrainian crews who are used to Soviet tanks to operate British tanks, and then you got to train them to operate German tanks, and then you got to train them to operate American tanks, and that's if they can even maintain the logistical supply line to work with these tanks, to keep them running. What kind of door are you opening now for the Russians to do? I mean, this is very clearly escalation. While Germany and the US are saying, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine tanks, the doomsday clock has been moved to 90 seconds to midnight. So this is basically, it's a measurement of how close we are to the end of the world, to the apocalypse, to annihilating the planet with nuclear weapons, right?
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line. Claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch off.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انت كلاب بصراحه يعني ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have 2 number 9s. A number 9 large.
we got him.
I told myself, I know it's not.
Why you texting? Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. Okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
Oh man, it's so funny because I was just thanking people who signed up on Patreon, and then it was, by the way, it's Hadi and hold on, I Greywind, Hadi and Greywind, and I think you guys figured out what I was gonna do. I dropped the crab dance. Let's go. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it, and you're very kind. So again, if you guys want to, I haven't plugged the show. I mean, we've been going for 3 hours, so come on. If you want to support my work, please do. I'm an independent journalist, and every dollar, ruble, or bar of gold helps. Man, the ruble, how could the ruble be the best performing currency of the year despite all the sanctions? I mean, how stupid does that make us look? Don't get me wrong, the sanctions suck and they hurt everybody, but you guys better start paying me in renminbi and rubles. I'm kidding. Thank you to everybody. Remember, even just liking and sharing and commenting helps the stuff. Anyway, let me get down to business. I wanted to kind of walk you guys through this. It's so funny. I mean, okay. So the idea, I mean, today was kind of to just speak with Dave and keep it that. But you know, there was some breaking news stories. So I wanted to go through them with you. By the way, before I forget, there are 2 more interviews. So you know, mark these in your calendars. The next one is this Sunday, and that's going to be, if you are in Paris, it's going to be at 7 p.m. Okay, or if you're in Berlin, it's also 7 p.m. If you're in London, it's 6 p.m. If you're in New York, it's going to be 1 p.m. And if you're in Los Angeles, it would be 10 a.m. So that's one interview. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You just have to show up and watch. They're going to be live. And the next one is, so just to be clear, that's June the 12th, right? June 11th. And then there's another one on Tuesday 13th, okay? And that one's 5 p.m. Paris time or Berlin time. Anyway, so I'll remind you again in the community posts. Let's go through this. Okay, so I don't like to laugh at, you know, other people's misfortune. Or as it's also called, Schadenfreude. But in this case with Trump has just been indicted using the Espionage Act. That is the exact same law that he used against Julian Assange. I mean, you can call it karma, or, you know, who goes around comes around. Again, Trump is despicable. I have no love for Trump. You know, this guy's killing people in Syria with sanctions. He murdered Soleimani, pulled out of the nuclear deal. You know, done nothing but nonsense. You know, putting neocons in his cabinet.
What is that? You know? So no sympathy whatsoever, but this is just something else. I mean, really, what are the odds of that? So in any case, you know, there you have people in liberal, or I mean, neoliberal is and neocon is, you know, they're kind of indistinguishable these days. But people in traditionally neoliberal media going wild. They're so happy that Trump has been indicted, etc., etc. And, you know, something funny that I saw is that basically he had classified documents in his bathroom, right? So he was showing classified documents, they allege, in the indictment, right? They allege. I frankly have no clue if this is true, and I don't care, and I'll tell you why in a second. So they were saying he was showing off classified documents to, you know, his waiter or something, and this is after he had left the Oval Office, right? So he was no longer president, and he was saying that if I was still president, I could easily declassify this, but you know, don't look at it too close. So you know, they got a grand jury together, and now they've indicted him, and he's looking at a lot. And I'll play you the video right here from Special Counsel Jack Smith. Let's see what he has to say.
Good afternoon. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. This indictment was voted by a grand jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida, and I invite everyone to read it in full to understand the scope and the gravity of the crimes charged. The men and women of the United States intelligence community and our armed forces dedicate their lives to protecting our nation and its people. Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice, and our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone. Applying those laws, collecting facts, that's what determines the outcome of an investigation. Nothing more and nothing less.
Okay. He sounds like he's giving a presentation about the Constitution to like first graders or something. Yeah, okay. We get the America First speech. Okay, yeah. So let me just break this down for you, okay? Just here's a summary. So Trump is charged with 37 counts of in the domain of classified documents, right? So 2 of his lawyers have resigned from representing him. They're no longer ready to be affiliated with him. All right. So you have people saying he shouldn't run for president anymore, and I mean that depends on who you ask, right? I frankly don't even get me started on this, but he is a presidential candidate. So you know they're saying, well, how can he be running for president when he has this huge case looming over his head, etc., etc., right? So for me, I'll tell you why this whole thing doesn't matter, and it's very simple. You have to understand that the Espionage Act of 1917, right? It's over 100 years old. This was crafted during World War I, and you might think from the name that this is about fighting spies, catching spies, you know, foreign agents, etc., etc. This has more to do with attacking dissidents, political opponents, people you don't like, than it does with fighting foreign powers, or shall we say, catching spies at home and people who are sabotaging the war effort, etc., etc. Right?
you guys know that I've been saying this for years to you, how this tool was used, for example, against Eugene Deb, right? So they took his passport away, right? They stripped him of his citizenship. I think he was also hit with sedition. So it was Espionage Act and sedition, loss of citizenship, and yeah, he also got 10 years, okay? So because of those two. Daniel Ellsberg, Pentagon Papers. So they tried to go after him, but it didn't work because I think they got caught breaking into his psychiatrist's office trying to gather dirt on him. And so the case was thrown out. And then, of course, you know, it isn't used that often, quote unquote, right? But let's put it this way. Obama really liked to use it, to the point that Obama employed the Espionage Act against, you know, more journalists and whistleblowers than all previous U.S. presidents combined. Okay, so Jeffrey Sterling, I interviewed him. The interviews here on the channel. He used to work for the CIA. You have Thomas Drake, Chelsea Manning, John Kiriakou, Edward Snowden, Daniel Hale. You know, these are the majority of them whistleblowers. But you see with Julian Assange, he's not an American. He has never lived or worked in the United States. He does not owe the United States anything. And even though he is an Australian citizen in the United Kingdom, you know, we put him in a cage in Belmarsh prison, which is the worst prison, category A. And why is Julian Assange being held in solitary confinement? Because the United States is charging him with the Espionage Act. And it's so ironic that Trump and, of course, Mike Pompeo at his side, you know, they tried to get Julian Assange and punish him for doing good journalism, for exposing U.S. war crimes and the crimes of European countries in Afghanistan and at home and so on. They tried to screw him using the Espionage Act, and now the Espionage Act has come back to bite Trump. Now, do I think that Donald Trump has taken classified documents with him? Yes. Yeah. I think he certainly did, and I think every U.S. president has taken them. But Joe Biden, who wasn't even president at the time, he was the vice president, also took home documents, and they found them recently, and so on. Does this mean they are spies? No. Does this mean they should be thrown in prison for hundreds of years? Well, yeah, but you know, more for killing people and murdering them with bombs and sanctions rather than taking a few documents that no one cares about. Catch my drift? So, you know, if you're going to go after these guys, I mean, you could easily open, you know, a crimes against humanity case against both Joe Biden and Trump for what they've done with sanctions, right? Which is the modern equivalent of siege warfare. What is siege warfare? You surround a city and you starve people to death. You allow people and the city itself to rot with disease, with famine, etc. It's very cruel. Some would argue it's crueler than being killed with weapons, right? That's how bad siege warfare is. So that's what sanctions do. So my point here is that, you know, you can certainly do justice by, or try to, by a lot of these victims by going after Trump and Biden for things that they actually did and actually have severe consequences. You could even argue, and I was just talking about this with David McBride, right? Lawyer, officer, major in the British Army and then in the Australian SAS, so Special Forces. He knows what he's talking about, and he was saying that the behavior that we have in the West, whether it's the UK, US, you know, NATO, of going and bombing other countries and invading them, that turns people against us. It makes them hate us. I mean, when someone drops a bomb through your ceiling and kills your family or maims you, you're not exactly going to be in the mood for sending them, you know, chocolates and roses, are you? So, you know, just by doing that, by committing acts of aggression, you harm national security, because now you have created more ill intent and more threats towards your country, no matter where you're from, you know, hypothetical or otherwise. So that's something else that you could argue, by the way. But no, I don't think Donald Trump is, you know, stealing documents and giving them to the Russians. Come on, please, come up with something more original. You know, I really don't like this. There are a million things that you can say about Trump that you can criticize him for. And these are serious crimes. I mean, look at Soleimani. Like, he assassinated, he murdered somebody. He murdered somebody. When you drone strike someone for no reason, you know, and don't give me this, oh, but, you know, Soleimani was targeting American soldiers. Where? In the United States? Where? In Iraq? What were they doing in Iraq? If American and British soldiers can come to Basra and Baghdad and run around Iraq, why can't the Iranians then? The difference, at least then, is that the Iranians care about stability, whereas, you know, we don't. We care about oil. So this is not an excuse, and even in his so-called, you know, justification, his pretext, he cited the war in Iraq. So this is the AOMF of 2002. What does Soleimani have to do with that? Did you fall into your time machine by accident? Like, go back 2 decades? What is this? In any case, you know, being the president of the United States doesn't give you the right to murder people. So, you know, they're going after Trump, very simply put. They're using the Espionage Act, among other tactics, against Trump just because they don't like him. That's it. But what I'm telling you is that the Espionage Act has always been a political tool, right? Donald Trump is not some martyr or something, or the first, the poor victim. No. This has always been a political tool since its inception, okay? Eugene Debs, they threw him in prison, gave him 10 years, took away his citizenship stripped. Why? Because he was running for president, he was a socialist, and he told people not to go and not to go to war, not to obey the draft. All right? I know the Americans have a tendency to join wars a bit late. Cough, cough. But in any case, that's... I don't know about you, but I don't think you should strip someone of their citizenship in that case. That's just extreme, and vicious. And it shows you over 100 years ago, right, what this is really about. It's attacking people you don't like. Whether they deserve it or don't deserve it, I mean, this is completely irrelevant. The Espionage Act should be used for spies, you know, and it's ironic, right? Because Pollard was an Israeli spy. Well, he was an American who was passing off American military secrets to Israel, right? So he betrayed his country. And if I'm not mistaken, it's Trump who let him out, right? And it's difficult with Pollard because that guy was in prison for a long time. In any case, I know that Netanyahu went to meet him when he landed, and it was Sheldon Adelson who you know, gave him a private jet to fly him there. I mean, you don't hear much criticism about him, an actual spy, when that happened. There was some initially, you know, when that whole story came out back then, but that's a few decades ago. Let me show you just very quickly. There was also...
We brought somebody...
Oh, God, she started already. Viewer discretion is advised. There's insane cringe incoming.
We brought somebody forward in our American national politics who's being treated this way. The problem is that we brought somebody forward in our national politics with these kinds of criminal liabilities. I mean, as he was going to the White House in 2016, He had to pay $25 million to settle fraud claims about his fake university. Shortly thereafter, he had to pay a multi-million-dollar settlement to shut down his fraudulent fake charity. His business has been criminally convicted as a fraud. His CFO just got out of Rikers. His campaign chairman served time in federal prison as a fraud. His campaign manager is awaiting trial as a fraud on fraud trials. Like, with a person with that kind of track record, are we surprised that the person at the middle of all of that has been indicted? No, it is not surprising. What is surprising is that we put that person in the White House. We brought somebody forward in.
Jesus Christ, man, has she ever heard of George Bush? Yeah, I also thought of that phrase. Wow, they really put this guy in the White House? I mean, I think they did. I don't know. But no, seriously, I wish she had the same kind of fervor and zeal when it comes to, criminals in her own camp. Because if you want to talk about frauds and you want to talk about, criminals, I mean, look no further than your own party. It's the one party anyway. You know, the United States is run by a conglomerate of corporations, and some of them are blue and some of them are red. But at the end of the day, they're capitalists, and they're we're talking about people who have such an obsession with power and money that they literally just do nothing but murder innocents, whether it's in Vietnam or it's running some nice little CIA terror campaigns in Latin America. And keep in mind, that's not to say like, oh my God, America is evil. No. You got a few people running America who are evil. And it's the same thing in Britain. You got a few people in the a couple hundred people or a few thousand people. What is that in terms of percentage? It's nothing. It's almost irrelevant. And nevertheless, they are the ones in control. They are the ones who control the banks. They what are the power centers? The intelligence agencies, the military, the arms manufacturers, and then of course the media and the banks, right? These things are the real power centers. When you want to talk about challenging the status quo and challenging your government and all these things, that, oh yeah, when people do that in Russia, oh my God, they're so brave. Let's do it here. Let's do it at home. These are the power centers. You got the same gang of crooks running, giant countries like the United States or, 100 years ago, the British Empire, which was the biggest empire in history. And just they do nothing but spread destruction. And it's a shame. It's a shame. I wish they had this kind of, fire in them when it mattered. Who gives a crap about Trump? This guy's so irrelevant. He's so irrelevant. He, honestly, he's. I was telling you about Soleimani and about what Trump pulling out of the nuclear deal and the sanctions that he re-triggered on Iran and the new ones on Syria. Is he really that different? No, he's the same. The stealing of the oil. Why doesn't Rachel Maddow talk about Joe Biden stealing oil from Syria? Why doesn't she say that? She's so concerned about criminals in American politics. You have one right now who's in the White House. Right now. He's stealing oil from Syria. Why don't you say anything about that? You think oil is fucking cheap? You think that the United States would send troops to take this if it were meaningless? This is black gold. It's called black gold for a reason. And they're stealing it because they know they can get away with it. They're stealing it. And it was Donald Trump who started it. Well, at least out in the open. And Joe Biden who continues it. They do it because Rachel Maddow, Fox News, pick whatever channel you like, the entire apparatus and the papers, the New York Times, Washington Post, blah, blah, there is nothing there that really, puts their feet to the fire. There's nothing there keeping them in check. And, they tell you, oh, well, the West is a real democracy. And, we even have the fourth pillar because we're so democratic. We're like uber democratic. We have a fourth pillar, right? In addition to the judiciary, legislative, and the executive. We have the media, the press. The press is so important. It is actually necessary because it needs to keep the government in check. Well, where is it? Man, I'm telling you, I watch the German news, I watch the French news, and it is just copy pasted, the same messaging, the same conditioning, the same garbage propaganda. Everything is the same. There's no difference. And if you thought that, oh well, in the UK maybe it's different from the US, yeah, there are some cultural differences and so on, but the underlying messaging, there's no difference. It's always the same. Why do you think that is? Because they're all equally enlightened? No. It's frankly the opposite. I know I've gone off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I don't care because this needs to be said. Now, Donald Trump, I don't think he'll get anything but a slap on the wrist. Look at the former French president, Nicolas Sarkozy, right? I showed you, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, around the time of the Arab League, what happened to him. So basically, before the current French president, Macron, it was him, right? So it's not that long ago that he was the president. And get this, right? They brought 3 cases against him. And one of them is because of, he exceeded the limits of campaign financing. I did a whole video explaining the charges. But the worst one, the most insulting one, the craziest one is they're prosecuting Sarkozy because he took money from Gaddafi. That's it. He took money from Gaddafi. Like, the money that he took is illegal because Gaddafi is so evil that even in his death, this must be prosecuted. Right? Not, oh, actually he bombed a sovereign country. He bombed Libya. And shame on the UN for going along with this. Shame on them in the UN Security Council. Shame. But let me just focus on France, because Sarkozy specifically, he took money to run for president from Gaddafi. So Gaddafi helped him get elected. And then after he gets elected, he goes and bombs the guy who helped him finance it. I mean, I've never heard of something so low. Politics is low, right? Backstabbing, there's going to be backstabbing, unfortunately. But this is not backstabbing. This is fighter jet stabbing. Literally, motherfuckers sent Rafale, the French fighter jets. They came with NATO, the defensive alliance, right? They're so defensive that their horizons have expanded beyond Europe's borders and past the Mediterranean into Libya by chance. So defensive they are. I mean, there's treachery, and then there's Sarkozy, right? So for one of the crimes, one of the cases, he got 3 years, 2 years of them, two of the 3 suspended. So there's only 1 year left that he has to do. And guess what? It's at home with an ankle monitor. Oh no. What a perilous fate. So I think if Donald Trump, does end up getting into very, very, very hot water, and he already is, but at the end, I could be completely wrong. I'm just telling you because you see how the powerful are treated, and you had the special counsel who I just played to you saying there's one rule. There's one set of rules, and it applies to everyone. No, that's completely wrong. You have like 15 tiers of rules depending on how many zeros are in your bank account, or I should say rather figures. But Sarkozy, if he were somebody else, he would have gone to prison for much more than 3 years, right? And Donald Trump, I sense, will also have by chance suspended sentences that he can do at home. That's how it is. That's how it is. The funny thing is that I remember
with AIPAC, right, which is basically the Israeli lobby in the United States. I saw I saw them on Twitter. Like I witnessed this live as they were turning on Trump. When I say turning on Trump, I mean they stabbed him in the back, because this guy, and I did the video, it's on the channel, it's called, I think, Donald Trump was the best gift ever to Israel or something like that. And it's true, because all US presidents support Israel, but Donald Trump is high up there. You know why? Because he moved the US embassy to Jerusalem. He apparently he became, the steward of the Syrian Golan Heights, and just decided that, well, this chunk of Syria, which the whole world, including the United States, has always viewed as Syria, is now Israeli. And he made Netanyahu his not just BB, but his BFF. And on top of that, he was basically sending Mike Pompeo over to Jerusalem, not only to move the embassy, but to say this, lousy speech that it is the eternal capital of Israel, and Palestinian two-state solution. What? Goodbye. I mean, Trump is not the one who came up with that. The two-state solution and the idea of a Palestinian state was waved farewell a long time ago in Washington, D.C. But my point is that he did a lot for the Israelis politically, right, diplomatically, etc. And of course, he didn't he give them the... Oh no, I'm skipping ahead in time with the additional funding for Iron Dome. That was better. Never mind. But my point still stands, and you should go watch the video. Oh, and of course he killed Soleimani. I mean, I spoke of Soleimani like 10, 15 minutes ago. So, nevertheless, it's definitely worth mentioning. And Trump even, he blabs a lot, and he's said to people, or people have quoted him as allegedly saying that the Israelis pushed him to do it. I have no fucking doubt they pushed you to do it. Yes. And then, he was killing Americans. He didn't tell you the part where the Israelis pushed him to do it. Yeah, the Israelis don't like Soleimani. You know why? Because General Soleimani is not just some general with 4 stars or something on his epaulets. He was the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. Yes, okay, but why is he so important? Because he was basically helping, not running, because they tell you oh my God, everybody's a puppet of Iran. No. This guy was just helping and assisting other countries in the Middle East who are, what a coincidence, either occupied by the Israelis or the Americans. He was helping them to resist that, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Yemen, Syria, PMU in Iraq, and so on, right? And Iran, of course, again, not being like the head or something. I would perhaps say just an essential driving force is a good way to put it, because it's kind of like when you talk about China and New Silk Road and all of this. China's not controlling it. It's just an idea that they've had, and other countries want to implement, and that's it. It's a joint project and venture and so on. And that's how you view the Middle East now. It's a one front, one axis of resistance, and that's why who's a neoconservative scumbag who wrote George Bush's speeches, right? It's like saying he wrote, it's like the equivalent of writing speeches for Hitler, I don't know if you guys remember, but I remember War on Terror, so-called, War on Terror, invasion of Iraq. I mean, this, if you watch that even now, it just sends chills down your spine. This is in any case, this guy, he came up with this term axis of evil. And so someone turned it, flipped it on its head and said, no, not axis of evil, axis of resistance. And it kind of stuck. So, yeah. In any case, no, I don't think Trump is going to get punished so severely. I don't think that he'll get anything save a slap on the wrist, frankly speaking. Again, that could turn out to be wrong, but the irony, I hope the irony hasn't here it is. I'll post the link, 49 pages, right? If you want to read the 37 count indictment. But yeah. I certainly noticed the irony of the fact that the Espionage Act came back to bite him in the ass. What can I say? Free Julian Assange. That's what I can say. So, there's this speech I was gonna... Oh God, it's election season soon, and I just know I'm gonna have to suffer through all of this again with you guys. Oh my God. I mean, the thing is that I'd watch it anyway. I was even watching Bush debate Kerry in 2004. I even remember that. But I'll watch it anyway, but I was able to kind of tolerate it because we would watch it live together. I'm talking about the debates that they would have, for example, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, in their party they have their internal debates and so on, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's a bit dull in some ways because foreign policy is one of the most important things, and when you unfortunately, when you look at the American candidates, and when I say that, I mean the mainstream ones who are, of course, Democrat, Republican, basically the same thing. There's no difference whatsoever. That's what makes it dull. Yeah, maybe they have different ways of saying no healthcare. But their foreign policy is quite, transparent. But we'll go through it. I will suffer for you. Who said this in the chat? Somebody said, I think it was Gunny. Gunny said Trump is a criminal. Well, absolutely. But they're not going after him for the actual crimes, That's the thing with Trump. Even his impeachments. It was like... there were a million things they could have impeached him on, where, he was screwing around, citing AUMF 2002 for, assassinating Soleimani, doing a million things that are actual heinous crimes, both in the U.S. and outside. They didn't do anything. You know why? Because if a Democrat was standing in his shoes, as Biden is now, they just, they would just turn a blind eye. That's it. So just like the impeachments, when it comes to the case now, I don't think that they will be doing too much. You guys, thank you very much. You'll have to forgive me because some of you have sent things on PayPal. Man, I still haven't gotten it to work. Please be patient with me. And I'm checking to see if we have anyone new on Patreon. Usually it notifies me. So in any case, if you want to support the show, please do. You can donate $1 a month. I think we just got a new Patreon. Or £1 a month, or any currency. Any amount that you like. Thank you very much to Delta, and here's a crab dance for you. Thank you for supporting the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line, claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch off.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انت كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي. We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China. 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 China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have 2 number 9s. A number 9 large.
we got him.
I know it myself. I know it's not.
Why you texting? Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. Okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
All right, guys. Thank you so much again. Thank you to Delta for supporting the show, and you guys are amazing. So keep in mind, next interview is going to be Sunday. That's at 7 p.m. Paris time. And if you're in London, it's 6 p.m. If you're in New York, that's 1 p.m. Los Angeles, 10 a.m. So I'll see you guys very soon. Take care. Ma salame. Bye-bye. And share the interview that I just did with David. He needs the support, and we need to raise awareness for his case. Thank you guys very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Sweden wanted to join NATO. They broke with their decades-long neutral stance. Turkey was one of the only countries, I think, along with Hungary, that was saying, we're not going to let you in, because you need to have consensus, right? You need all the members in NATO to say, okay, you can join. Their bid has kind of been in limbo because Turkey wanted to, extract several concessions. It was very clear that they really want to join NATO in Sweden, and they were doing everything they could to appease the Turks. And then this moron comes in front of the Turkish embassy and burns the Quran. I understand that in their point of view, this is freedom of expression, and you're in Sweden, you can do whatever you like. But you have to remember that if you're trying to get Turkey support, maybe wait until after you've gotten it. I mean, this is just dumb from a diplomatic level. They're doing everything to appease Turkey, and then because of one idiot, they let this go to waste. The Germans and the Americans have decided that it would be a good idea to send Ukraine tanks. German tanks against the Russian. Man, I'm perplexed by this. What do they think is going to happen? Because even if you can train the Ukrainian crews who are used to Soviet tanks to operate British tanks, and then you got to train them to operate German tanks, and then you got to train them to operate American tanks, and that's if they can even maintain the logistical supply line to work with these tanks, to keep them running. What kind of door are you opening now for the Russians to do? I mean, this is very clearly escalation. While Germany and the US are saying, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine tanks, the doomsday clock has been moved to 90 seconds to midnight. So this is basically, it's a measurement of how close we are to the end of the world, to the apocalypse, to annihilating the planet with nuclear weapons, right? And this is the closest it's ever been to midnight, okay? Midnight representing the end. Ukraine's most senior military commander has said that his forces need about 300 Western tanks. Over the last year, NATO allies in Eastern Europe supplied Ukraine with Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks that have been ground down or destroyed in constant fighting. Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks. Now, Ukraine, having been a Soviet satellite state and part of the Soviet Union, it was part of Russia, all of its military personnel being trained on Russian tanks. What do you think they're going to do with American tanks or German tanks, which they are not trained to operate? The Ukrainians know how to operate Russian tanks. That's all they know how to operate. The Ukrainians only use Soviet stuff, right? Until the last couple of years and until now. This is the first major influx of NATO weapons. And again, NATO has been training Ukrainian forces, but Challenger tanks, this is brand new. If they can't even use the tanks that they're trained to use, what makes you so confident they're going to know how to use a Leopard 2 or an M1A2 or a Challenger 2? Man, people train on those things for fucking months and years. Both of these home secretaries, okay, Suella Braverman and Priti Patel, both their parents came to the United Kingdom, and under their own laws as home secretary, they themselves would not have been able to come to the UK, to be born in the UK, and to have a life there. So like the hypocrisy is so disgusting, you know, like I got what I wanted. I'm okay, I'm secure, I can live in the UK, I'm the home secretary now. Now I'm gonna shut the gates. Now I'm gonna screw people that have literally nothing, that are so desperate they're, you know, risking drowning in the Channel or the Mediterranean Sea. People have to resort to risking drowning. They have to resort to, you know, hiding in trucks or swimming across the Channel, if everyone's ever done that, crossing the Channel because of her policies, because she forces people into doing that, right? So you literally have no choice. You have to be in the UK to begin the application. What are people supposed to do? Just teleport, you know, for 5 minutes, write down the form and just get out of the UK? This is ridiculous. She's a liar, just like the one, her predecessor, Priti Patel. Why is Germany reluctant to give the Ukrainians tanks? That's a really tough one. I wonder why. Germany has long refused to send its most potent weapons to countries in conflict, a byproduct of its legacy of starting World War II and World War I. That's horse manure, because Germany does send weapons to countries in war. Saudi Arabia is one of them. So to get around this, the trick that they use is they don't sell the tanks and the ordnance directly to Saudi Arabia. They move it to Italy, and then from Italy they sell it to the Saudis. So they basically just insert a middleman, and that's how they get around this very, honorable principle of theirs, which they never abide by. If you go and you look up the Yemen war, I mean, you're going to see weapons from fucking everywhere. The Canadians have been selling weapons and making money. Britain, the US, Australia, everyone. And the Germans are no exception. So I mean, the idea is true, but they fucking send weapons. They goddamn do. They do.
Do you see how they move like snakes? Do you see how they move like snakes? They get the media to whisper in your ear, "Oh, don't go on strike. No, don't strike. It'll cripple the economy." Oh. No, it's not, like giving the army 800 billion to fucking bomb, 20 countries. That's okay. That money, we can spare that. But if you go on strike where, oh my God, we're going to lose like 2 billion a day, well, we can't afford that. The Pentagon has been audited, I think 5 times now, and every single audit was failed. That means they don't know where the money's going. The Pentagon is like a black fucking hole that sucks trillions of dollars, and the government doesn't even know where the money's going. I can tell you where it's going. You don't need to audit the Pentagon. I can tell you, me, Richard Medhurst, that money is going towards drug deals, towards arms sales, towards arms purchases, towards CIA fucking budgets and embassy coffee. That's where that shit is going, man. That shit is going to the spooks. That shit's going to the bombers. That shit's going to the paramilitaries. That's where it's going. You don't need to scratch your head. That's where it's going. And apparently that's an acceptable loss. That's an acceptable use of American dollars and taxpayer dollars. But, going on strike, oh, that's too much of an inconvenience. That's the fucking